in the end, I do enjoy the song, and I do think that Nate's interpretation of it is probably correct in terms of like what the lyrics are getting at. I doubt it's actually necessarily about vegetables. I think it's more about, we're all fucked up together. We're all vegetables. So,
Brian was like, "How can I write about weed without Mike getting on my ass?"
right. Mike's just like, oh, yeah, health food. Cool.
Yeah.
Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to the 60th episode of Good Timin. As always in this podcast, we're going to be talking about one of our favorite bands, the Beach Boys. And on today's show, we're going to be discussing the group's famous unfinished album from 1967, Smile, and the material that was recorded for it. So, as usual with our album discussion episodes, we're first going to go over some of the history and background behind the record, and then we will go track by track through the proposed track list that was released on the Smile Sessions box set from 2011. And then lastly, at the end of the episode, we will talk about some of the additional tracks that were recorded during the sessions, as well as share some brief thoughts on Brian's finished solo version of the record from 2004, Brian Wilson Presents Smile. So joining me for tonight's episode, I have my good friends Riley, Matt, and Nate. So as always, I'm happy to have you guys here, and I'm looking forward to hearing your guys' thoughts on the Smile Sessions material. So before we get into Smile's history, do you guys have any general thoughts or feelings about the record that you wanted to share?
Boy, do I got some thoughts. I don't want to go first though. I think we got to start off a little bit positive, so I think Nate should go first.
All right. So I think there are key moments in the history of art and technology that propelled the medium forward. You think about The Jazz Singer, which was the first film with talking in it, and that changed the medium of film. You think about Wizard of Oz and the way that it introduced color to the masses, really, in film. You think about Sam Phillips using the tape echo on those old Elvis recordings, and that essentially created production as opposed to just recording. So there's all these moments in art where the medium was changed. You have Walt Disney opening Disneyland, to throw a bone to Matt. Before this, it was just amusement parks, carnival rides, midways, and Walt Disney saw there could be something
Jake
more.
and I are thinking the exact same thing.
So I've given all these examples to say that I think Smile was a similar moment in the history of art and technology and the way those things come together. Because with what Brian was doing with the tape experimentation and sound effects and arranging was so groundbreaking that it changed the medium of recording forever. And you can point out Good Vibrations and the stuff that Brian was doing around this time as a huge leap forward in how producers and engineers thought about recording music. And it's really the predecessor to Pro Tools and all the digital sophisticated tools we have today. You can draw a line back to what Brian was doing in 1966.
I guess I'll go next. I think this album has some really good tracks on it. Like there really are some wonderful tracks on it, but at the same time, it was never finished. It never was. So ultimately, like I kind of see this as like the ultimate what could have been album because again, some great stuff on it, definitely some very experimental stuff. But it was never finished. So some of it obviously does sound like fragments. But we'll get more into that as we go on.
Yeah, I just don't really think it's much of an album. It's a Sorry, I'm on my bed because I don't have a desk anymore. My room's all full of boxes. Um, yeah, I just don't think it's an album. It's just a collection of tracks, and it was organized in a specific way to match Brian's 2004 Smile, or at least resemble it. So to even like call it like a cohesive thing, I think would kind of be a mistake. Like the songs go together well, and there's a lot of repeating motifs that you hear throughout the record, which I think is really cool. Um, but like just it's not finished, and beyond that, it's not really like real. It's not really like a real album. It is a compilation of a compilation album. Um, because to know what the actual 67 release would have looked like is absolutely like a mystery. There's the closest thing I think we've gotten to it is just a couple of like fan mixes of what Capitol probably would have put together. But as is, this is definitely far from what we would have gotten. Who knows what the track order would have been if it was completed. So it's not
Aside
completed.
from the track order, the music itself was pretty close to completed. And the body
Yeah,
of
I think
work,
the music itself is great. I think that it amazes me more than I like actually like it. Like, I mean, I don't really come back to this one a lot, but it does amaze me, like a lot of the sounds that we've gotten and the way that Brian is able to arrange it. A lot of it just sounds, and I mean this like in the best way possible, just very smushed together. Because it impresses me that like he got all sorts of instruments blended together at certain different volumes, playing different notes to make one really cool sound. And I think the best example probably is Fire, even though I'm sure I'll talk more about that one later. Um, it just sounds because I heard the session thing that Jake sent me of like Brian's like, okay, just the flutes play, and you just hear the flutes, and then he's like, all right, now just more of the horns come in, and then when it's put together, it sounds nothing. You don't really hear the parts. You just kind of hear awesome. It's really cool.
Yeah.
And like a lot of the stuff he's going for were like songs like Good Vibrations, where the verses and the choruses are so different, but it's like a symphony in like within like it's a pocket symphony. That's what they called it. A bunch of songs like that, like Cabanessis, Heroes and Villains, they're all incredible. But as is, I mean, it's just I don't know. I can't see it as like an actual album. So when I see it on lists, so like, oh, greatest albums of all time, or here's my 10 favorite albums of all time, it's just not really an album. And then I see people be like, oh, yeah, like it's unfinished, but as is just better than anything else the Beach Boys have released. And I don't think so. I just don't think that can be the case. I mean, I mean, first of all, you have Pet Sounds, but then you have stuff that's just like, it's complete. It's an artistic statement. It's full, and you have this, which was quite literally just like slapped together. I mean, think about it. Besides the actual like 19 songs, which by the way, who knows the order, but besides the actual 19 songs themselves, you have like hours, literal hours of just session footage just put onto discs. And so if you're looking at the 19 song track list, which I think we are looking at, it still is relatively slapped together. And it wasn't Brian, I'm sure, had pretty little input into it. It was, I think, the band and then like a lot of like Capitol executives and just people in the music industry trying to put together something that is so unput togetherable. So
I think Brian had significant involvement. And I'm always one to say when I think he may not have. But the track list on this version, which, like you said, comes from the 2004 version, and the 2004 version was Brian, Van Dyke, and
yeah. I
Varian.
meant I didn't mean I mean not Brian had no involvement, but I mean in terms of like when they're putting together the Smile sessions themselves, that specific thing, it was executives and I'm sure Mike and Bruce and some of the other members may have had a little bit of input putting together like just what in theory could just as easily just be like a random session take um as the official song. So it was more or less just them piecing together based on something that came out in 2004 rather than what could have been like actual 1967. So again, I think that all kind of goes to my point is if it is, I don't know, I can't see it as an official album like many people do. And I definitely can't say it's the best when it's not even really real. If it was the actual Smile, they would have called it Smile, but it's called the Smile Sessions for a reason. That being said, the music is absolutely incredible. And I will get to a lot more positive thoughts when we get to that part.
Well, Riley, and another thing before I share my thoughts, another thing that kind of adds to what you're saying too is that some of the tracks on there too, like they were pulling from later recordings from the Beach Boys to make them sound more finished, you know? Like there's a part of the Smiley Smile version, I think, of Windchimes that they inserted in there. I think in between maybe Holidays and Windchimes to make it flow better or something. So like it's almost like
Surf's
it's like
Up
a
is like half the piano demo and just some stuff from like 72, I think.
yeah, they add in Carl's backing some backing vocals and stuff. Yeah, so I think that kind of adds to that too. But in
Okay.
terms of my feelings about Smile, I'm gonna try to keep my thoughts relatively brief so that we don't go too far down the rabbit hole. But for me, a lot of this material honestly did take quite a while to really click. There are some songs on here that I've really liked and appreciated for a long time. But then there's other songs that I've kind of struggled with up until like very recently. And even now, after re listening to the full album again, there's still a few tracks on here that I'm not really the biggest fan of. Specifically, some of the fragments, which, like Riley said, just don't really feel finished. That said, though, the thing that does really elevate a lot of these songs for me is Brian's production and arrangements. Like Riley said, the instrumentation throughout this album is just super cool. I really love the variety of different instruments. You have like marimba and harpsichord on some songs, and then on other tracks, there's cellos and woodwinds and horns and harmonicas. And I really just think that Brian did a really good job of creating this sort of like musical atmosphere with a lot of these tracks, which I can really appreciate. I also will say that the group vocals and harmonies on Smile, I think, are some of the best of the band's entire career. And I also think that they add a lot to the songs too. In terms of the kind of like abstract lyrics from Van Dyke Parks, I honestly can't say I'm like the biggest fan of them. I think on certain songs like Heroes and Villains and Surf's Up, I think that they totally fit the sound of the songs well and they kind of add to the atmosphere of it. But then on others, I can honestly kind of see where Mike was coming from with some of his like gripes and complaints.
What is a columnated ruined domino?
Or over and over the crow cries, yeah. But
Nate, by the way, I want that's a beautiful like backdrop behind you. It's like the sun's going down. I just wanted to say that before the sun did go down, and I couldn't say it anymore. I'm sorry, Jake.
don't let the sun go down on me.
You are
I,
my sunshine.
there you there you go. But yeah, honestly though, like as you guys know too, like I'm not even the biggest lyrics person to begin with. So it doesn't really affect my enjoyment of the album, like the fact that some of the lyrics are kind of weird. And then the last thing I'll say is that I think that I can appreciate this material a lot more when I'm just sitting down and listening to the music and not thinking about all of the lore and the history surrounding the album, which I will admit does get a bit exhausting for me at times. If you can't tell already, I'm definitely not one of these people that considers this to be like one of the absolute greatest albums of all time, like Riley said. And I also would not say that like I'd consider this like on the level of like Pet Sounds. I definitely put Pet Sounds above this, but I will say that I do think that the best songs here are some of the greatest things that Brian Wilson ever wrote and produced. So I'm really looking forward to discussing a lot of this material with you guys tonight. So, all right. So now to get into the history side of things, we're going to go to Nate. So, Nate, to kick us off, do you want to talk a bit about what led Brian to start recording Smile and also how he first came into contact with Van Dyke Parks?
Yeah, so from what I recall, Brian met Van Dyke at Terry Melcher's house. And as we all know, Terry Melcher was a friend of the band's, not only because he had a duo with Bruce, but Terry was also around a lot during the Pet Sounds sessions. He actually sang and played on a couple Pet Sounds songs. So Brian was hanging a lot with Terry Melcher at this time, and Terry introduced Brian to Van Dyke. And, as we all know, Van Dyke has a very eccentric, kind of academic way about him. And I think Van Dyke, and as well as his whole circle of friends and peers, they were all that kind of heady, intellectual, hippie, pseudo-intellectual, whatever you want to say, type of people. And so Brian was exposed to a whole new attitude and a whole new realm of thought. And I think that in the way that Brian was a few years prior so turned on by the surfing and the hot rods and trying to convey that culture and turn it into music. Now Brian was so fascinated with these kind of hippie guys culture and the things they were talking about, be it Western imperial, Western imperialism or eating healthy and vegetables or religion or acid, all these different things. Brian was kind of taking those things and turning them into music in the same way that he had done with surfing and all that. So you come off the heels of Pet Sounds, which the band and Brian considered a failure, which is, kind of funny in hindsight because it did moderately well, by all accounts, it did very well. Top 20 album, if not top 10 in most places. So still not too shabby. But Brian was so disappointed that the album wasn't a number one. So as we all know, he just poured himself into creating Good Vibrations and, writing that with Mike, and it did so well. And it was the band's biggest hit at that point. And at that point, the pressure was really on Brian to follow up that amazing work with Good Vibrations. And at this time, you have Derek Taylor coming into the fold, and he was not only the Beach Boys publicist at this time, but he was also the Beatles publicist. So, in a way, we have Derek Taylor to thank for creating the whole legend of the Beatles and the Beach Boys in competition and what that did for both bands in terms of elevating their music. And of course, they really were in competition to some degree, but that was also, an idea of Derek Taylor's to elevate the stakes, so to speak. So
Mhm.
I bring up Derek Taylor to mention the fact that he started writing a bunch of op-eds and started having a bunch of advertisements that painted Brian Wilson as the genius, the sole genius behind the Beach Boys. And there were ads taken out in magazines of Brian holding puppets, and the Beach Boys were his puppets, and I think that just puts so much weight on Brian's shoulders in a way that that weight didn't exist to that degree before this era. Before this, he'd have Carl with him a lot during the production, and obviously he'd be writing a ton with Mike. But now it was being painted that he was the sole responsible figure, and no one could live up to that. I don't care who you are. Elvis couldn't live up to that. Michael Jackson couldn't live up to that. Prince couldn't live up to that. And so Brian was struggling with that too, with having the limelight solely on him. So you have all these elements mixing. Um, and one thing I wanted to address as well related to the history is there's this myth that arose, particularly in the 90s and early 2000s, that the band and Brian were like this, butting heads, and that it was
Mhm.
one versus five, one being Brian and the other five boys. And, you listen to those session tapes and there's none of that. Like you listen to the tapes and you hear brothers and friends laughing, you hear them really hard at work, you hear them at arguably the peak of their craft, in terms of their blend and their creative vocalizing. So yeah, was a angle and a myth created to sell books and sell DVDs and to create a legend around the album when Brian was coming out with his solo version. But, even Brian himself later kind of put those myths to rest, and listening to this album and listening to the session tapes, like you guys mentioned, that populate most of the CDs, you hear a band that really loved each other and that supported each other, and you listen and you don't hear that Brian is the puppet master. Of course, Brian's the producer and the arranger, but all of those voices were crucial. And the way that they blended and they each brought something to the table with their voices. And so you hear things like Heroes and Villains, those a cappella sections where each band member is doing a really unique part. And it wouldn't be the same if you took Al away, if you took Dennis away, if you took Bruce away, if you took any of them away, it wouldn't have been the same. So they were just really all at the height of their singing. So I know I just threw a lot out there. You guys can round out my uh, history with any other points you guys want to make. But I think those were the main things cooking around this time that created the atmosphere of Smile.
Yeah, I will say too, like yeah, like you said, Nate, a lot of people present like, when we talk about why didn't Smile get finished, why wasn't it released, what went wrong, and a lot of people, like you said, like to blame other factors. Like they say, oh, Mike said this to Van Dyke and all that. The band was against Brian, but like really, like you read about Brian around this time, and like he was doing a lot of drugs, very self-critical of himself. They'd record just countless takes of these songs over and over and over again because the guy was just such a perfectionist around this time. And I just think from what I've read, the guy just exhausted himself just mentally. He just couldn't do it. And remember, this is at a time too when it's like, you had to do this. This was the old fashioned way. You're tape splicing and putting stuff together. And this is not just like, nowadays where like you're doing everything digitally. It would be so much more achievable and easier to do this now than back then. So, I can completely understand, why, the whole thing kind of collapsed around Brian and why he kind of lost it, I think,
The guy was taking methamphetamine pills.
right. He was on doing heavy stuff. This wasn't just like lightweight things. Like it was messing with his mind. And, you read about like the fire sessions and kind of like the crazy stuff that was going on. And the fact that Brian thought that, somehow they burned down a building down the street, like somehow that was related to the music. Like that's concerning, that's so, somebody is definitely like psychologically off, to make that correlation. So, yeah, it's a lot of people like to point fingers and stuff, but really, I just think that, with the amount of drugs that Brian was doing and everything, I think it really, like the fact that it didn't get finished, I think a lot of it just comes back to the fact of just, it was just too much for Brian with everything he had going on.
I also think that like beyond the fact that he's like perfectionist, I don't think he also knew fully what he wanted the album to look like.
Yep.
There was like constant revisions and there's new songs being written. And like, obviously with the hundreds, maybe thousands of takes, like there's no way, like that's part of the reason why we don't even know what the album was going to look like is that there's constant revisions and like different track lists and set lists, the dates being pushed back. Like Van Dyke left, like
Yeah,
because
and I'll add to that, not to cut you off, Riley, but with Van Dyke leaving, it's like I almost feel like like the lyrical themes and just like the concept of the album with like Americana and like like Nate said, like expanding west and all these different themes in the album. It's like I think a lot of that was Van Dyke. I think a lot of
yeah,
the
and then once
stuff.
then you have like fucking Fire, which is like the rest is all Americana, but then Brian wants to do the elements.
Well,
And
you're right. What I'm saying though is just like I think like that when Van Dyke did eventually like kind of like bail on it, where he was like, "This is getting too much," and like I have an issues with Mike now and stuff, and he's like, "This is too much for me." I feel like that like it made it where Brian was like, "Well, now we have no direction because now the guy that was like helping me out with all these lyrics and like figuring out like the words for these songs, now he's gone too. So it's like, what the hell do I do with the rest of this stuff? So
right.
Yeah, you do
It's
listen to
almost
Van Dyke's
directionless.
music and realize how much of an impact he really had on this album. Like it may as well be credited to the Beach Boys and Van Dyke Parks.
there's before we move on to the track by track, I want to say too, there's a lot of hypotheticals about with this album, obviously about like had it been released, how would it have done commercially, critically, and I see a lot of people say that they think this would have just been like such a huge like commercial success, like it would have just been like such a massive album and stuff, and like I don't know if I buy it. I just think like obviously okay, you've got Good Vibrations on there. You're gonna sell on the strength of that, and you got Heroes and Villains too. But I just think you look at the public reaction to Pet Sounds, which I think was far less eccentric than some of the
Yeah.
stuff on here, and I just think you would have had a similar, if not more, like a kind of extreme reaction from the public of like, what the hell is this. And critics, I'm sure there'd be plenty of critics that loved it, but a lot of people like to say that they think this would have been like such a huge like success commercially. I just don't think
I
so.
think it argue. I don't know if it would do worse than Smiley Smile, but it would
No, I don't think
definitely,
it would do worse than Smile.
it
I
would
don't think it
definitely
would
do
do.
worse than Pet Sounds. I mean,
Yeah,
like it to his credit, like Mike asking like what is crow cries over the cornfield and like what the fuck's a columnated ruined domino, like to his credit, like I don't really know how much of a commercial value there is to this thing. This is like made almost for music nerds. Like
yeah,
I see how that well how well that aged. But like Pet Sounds, even though it did pretty good. It wasn't like the smash hit that Brian wanted it to be, but it did pretty good because the lyrics are relatable. I mean, a lot of them are very much like depression, like teen romance kind of thing. These lyrics are not.
no, they're not.
They're I think they're spotty. I think some of them are incredible and they fit the song really well, and the others are just. But this would not have sold well. This wouldn't have outdone the Beatles, maybe critically, but definitely not commercially. The Beatles could literally shit into a microphone and sell it, and it would still chart. Um,
To provide a little bit of a caveat to that, there's a Dean Torrance quote I love uh when Jane and Dean were asked about like if they felt any type of way about preceding the Beach Boys, but then the Beach Boys coming along and having all these hits. Dean said, "Well, there's enough room on the chart for both of us." And I think that same thing could have applied to the Beatles and the Beach Boys as it had the previous few years. Like I don't think one necessarily has to outdo the other per se. For me, I don't see why this couldn't have done just as well as Sergeant Pepper because I love Pepper. I think it's one of the best albums I've ever heard. But I listen to Sergeant Pepper and I don't hear a single at all. Like I don't hear anything that sounds like it could be
I
a hit, a hit single, you know?
think
But
Lucy
they
in the
go
Sky with
together
Diamonds.
so well as a collection. And I think the same with Smile. Like I don't really, other than Good Vibrations, obviously, hear any hit singles on this album, but the way they go together is just like Pepper. Like it takes you on a ride, it tells a story. It's so colorful and imaginative. So I think the same crowd that did love Pepper and made that arguably like the most praised album of the 20th century. I think that same crowd would have just totally eaten this one up too.
I would argue, I see where you're coming from, Nate. I would argue honestly that Sergeant Pepper, I think from a music standpoint, is more quite a bit more accessible to the general public than a lot of this stuff. You have more clear melodies, more clear, strong song structures. I'm not saying, there is obviously some experimental stuff on there. There's some, stuff that is a
That's
bit
fair.
and like music, like Riley was saying, like more music nerdy stuff. But I just think that like, and I say this as someone that, I grew up with listening to the Beatles and I remember that album, a lot of
Yeah.
those songs clicked with me very quickly. Whereas with Smile, and I discovered Smile like, when I was, older, obviously. And a lot of these songs, like even as an older, listener now, like still like they took a while to really do anything for me. So I just think there definitely is more commercial accessibility, I think, with the Beatles than this Beach Boys material. But that said, I do see where you're coming from, Nate, with that case. And I do think there, like you said, there's an audience for both of this stuff. I personally have a hard time seeing this reaching the success of something like that. And I will also say too that I've seen people say that like, had this come out, the Beatles would have they would have maybe delayed their next album and like changed their trajectory.
No.
I don't know if I buy that either. I think
No.
maybe there would have been some influence. Maybe they would have done some even more experimental stuff, maybe worked on some more, but like they were always kind of being experimental around this time anyway. I kind of feel like they were kind of doing their own thing around this time. Not to say that there wouldn't have been an influence, but I don't really buy the idea that if this
No.
had come out a bunch of other bands that were like big at the time would have been like, whoa, 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 we got to
No.
stop
The,
and
the
make something.
Beatles the Beatles wrote and recorded and released Pepper in between the beginning and end of the Smile sessions.
Mhm.
So I don't that so that's just I don't think that's like even like a case
Well,
to.
I am just saying for future albums too,
Well,
because
yeah, but then even
yeah,
with like Magical Mystery Tour and,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
that kind of era of stuff, they were already doing that. I think Strawberry Field being written in like 66 and then so like they
I
were already on that direction. And then, again, they may have had like small influence, but I don't
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
think
right.
they
There
were
would have,
going in the route of the way popular music was just going in general. I mean, 67, you see the rise of bands like Cream, Hendrix and stuff. The music was getting way good, heavy guitar oriented. Like that was the route it was going. So I mean, maybe there would have been a little bit of influence, but I mean that music was already going down that route. The Beatles probably would have gone down the route of the White Album. I don't see maybe like in the underground scene, but then I don't know. I mean, even in 67, you got bands like the Velvet Underground, like already doing like very, I guess, proto indie punk stuff.
yep.
So music was already going in a direction, and I don't really know how much of a cultural shift it would have had. I mean, let's be honest, maybe in long term and like production wise, but like in terms of like popular music, did Pet Sounds have an immediate like shift in sound?
No, neither did the Velvet Underground. Sometimes, they took decades for the influence to be seen. As far as like what had an immediate impact, you're right. It was like the Cream, the Hendrix, the Zeppelins. The Zeppelins a couple of years down the road. My personal opinion, I honestly think some of the lore of this album clouds some people's judgment. I'm just being honest. Like it's like, oh, what could have been, and it's like it would have been this great shift. I just don't know. I just don't really hear the commercial viability of it. I think
And,
it's good music. But
And we know too how, Brian was so motivated by the charts. He wanted the stuff to sell well. He was very disappointed when Pet Sounds, didn't get the sales he was expecting, even though, it still sold relatively well. Like, had this not charted spectacularly, which I'm betting it wouldn't have. I think it would have charted, fine, but I don't think it would have been necessarily spectacular. If that had happened, people say, had this done, had this been released, Brian would have like kept going, like had the motivation to like keep putting out like crazy experimental stuff like this. I think though, if the chart success wasn't there for it, or it just wasn't up to his standards, I feel like it would have crushed him, and they probably still would have eventually kind of like withdrawn a bit from the band and gone to the more stripped back sound that they went to anyway. So I don't know. Again, it's just all hypotheticals, but like you said, Matt, I just think sometimes people get really caught up in the lore of this thing. So
Damn, that was a lot of words. We ready to get into the track listing?
yeah, yeah. Let's get into the track by track. So
So let's try to keep this under 2 hours.
yeah, let's Jesus. All right, so Nate, do you want to kick us off with the opening track on the album?
Yeah. Um, well, the album opens up with the magnificent a cappella piece, Our Prayer. And in this rendition of the album, you have Our Prayer paired with G, which is a doo-wop cover. Uh, you guys know I got to bring them up. Jane and Dean actually
I
covered
was going to
G,
mention that.
yeah, in 1960. And so I have to imagine that's probably what put it on Brian's radar. And Dean Torrance was actually hanging out with around the Smile sessions a lot during this time because he was no longer making music with Jan. But anyway, so yeah, just to get into my thoughts on this music is I think Our Prayer is honestly the greatest a cappella vocal piece I've ever heard. I mean, I guess I would maybe put Their Hearts Were Full of Spring up there too. Um, but yeah, like man, it's just very magnificent what Brian could do with those 4 or 5 voices. And it's just so melodic. Like I think I could hum the entire thing, which you can't do with very many wordless a cappella pieces, but it's just so gorgeous. And the counterpoint is beautiful. And then just as you're being so soothed and relaxed by Our Prayer, it jerks you in another direction into this weird kind of Jan and Dean thing with the G cover. Um, so yeah, I think it's a really, really unique way to start an album. And the Beach Boys and Brian would continue to do this, starting with an a cappella thing quite a few more times throughout their career, be it, That Lucky Old Sun or Think About the Days. So it kind of set a bit of a cliche for the Beach Boys to start their albums with like an a cappella bit.
I can go if you guys aren't. Yeah. Yeah. Our in terms of Our Prayer, like Nate said, I think this is a very haunting a cappella piece. The group harmonies on this, I think, are just beautiful. This isn't really something that like I really come back too much like on its own, but I think as an album opener, like the proposed album opener, I think that is very effective. And like listening to those session tapes of the guys working on this is really interesting as well. It just really shows like Brian's talent as a vocal arranger, and just like it's really cool just hearing the guys work together and figure this thing out. So really like Our Prayer as an opener. G, yeah, it's catchy. It's kind of like a heroes and villains fragment in a way, like listening to it. But this is another one of those ones where it's like I wouldn't really come back to it on its own, but it's fine for what it is. And like Nate said, Jan and Dean did this song too, and I actually do like their version quite a bit. I hadn't heard it before, but listening to it, I think it's pretty fun. So
Yeah, I think the it's gorgeous. I think it's probably the best way to open the album. If this was like slapped in the middle or slapped at the end, I don't think I really would have liked it as much. And that Nate kind of brings up a great point with the counterpoints of like you have that very soothing, sad-ish opening, and then you go dit 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 dit. And I think it's pretty cool because unlike the actual like song of G, that doo-wop song, which I've heard a couple of different versions of, you have that lead line that's saying oh G, and that's not in the not in this version. They actually kind of substituted at the end because it's only like what 40 seconds or so.
yeah,
With instead of having a lead vocal, you actually just do the Heroes and villains, did a water, heroes and villains, and it's kind of that motif, which is something I really like in these kind of albums. I know Smile isn't really an album, but in a lot of my some of my favorites, Pink Floyd, you have Dark Side of the Moon has a motif. The Wall has about like seven different motifs, and it's always fun hearing that because it kind of makes the thing a little bit more cohesive. So that idea of that like heroes and villains motif is that kind of being like is kind of in the first third of this, I guess, compilation, which is really cool. And it kind of has that like running theme of the first part of the so-called album. So I really like it. Really great opener.
Yeah, it is a good opener. It is very haunting. They sound great on it. And then I think the little snippet cover of G, I think it serves as a good transition segue into heroes and villains. It all flows really well.
Nate, do you want to kick us off with heroes and villains now?
Yeah, I don't even know how, but I'll do my best. Um, what a crazy goal Brian set for himself by trying to put together this wild piece of music. And, this is very much kicking off the way that the rest of the songs are going to work, where, you know, with most songs, you're used to having a verse and a chorus, a verse, bridge, that type of structure, which Brian had done, half a gazillion times on all the previous Beach Boys albums. But on this album, you're getting something completely different where you just have these 15, 30-second little fragments. You have all these kind of different musical ideas that might be in different keys and different tempos, and they're just juxtaposed together with the sonic equivalent of jump cuts, like in a movie, how instead of having a fade or a transition, just going boom right to the next scene, that's like what Brian's doing with the music. And so I think it's really easy to think of Smile in a cinematic lens and a cinematic language because it's very movie-like in that way, that there's these different scenes and you're going back and forth. So, Heroes and Villains kicks off the whole Western Americana vibe that fills the first side of the album. And yeah, it's just an incredible piece of music or a collection of music, however you want to think about it. And it takes a lot of inspiration from Phil Spector's River Deep, Mountain High, and it sort of takes that bass line and that general rhythm and expands on it. And I my personal favorite version is probably Brian's solo version or the 45 Smiley Smile version, because I think those are just the best in terms of being a singable pop song that you can just listen to and enjoy. But man, I've heard 8-minute versions of Heroes and Villains. I've heard 12-minute, 20-minute. Like there's so many different mixes of this song. So it's almost hard to comment on it because we could all comment on it and be commenting on different versions with different verses and different structures. But incredible, incredible piece of music. It's rocks, it's moving. The wordplay is really fun, especially that like margarita section has some cool lyrics. So yeah, it's just to me it's like the equivalent of a Technicolor film on sound, it's just like it's like looking at a painting. You see all these different colors just from the music.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very impressive recording. Like you said, Nate. I know, Brian put a crazy amount of time into this thing. I think like, he'd been working on it pretty much from the start of the Smile sessions to the very end, and he was really proud of this song. And, I will say though, Nate, you said you prefer the like the single mix that came out in 67, but personally I actually strongly prefer this Smile sessions version of the song, mainly because it has that middle section, the in the cantina dance margarita section. Really like that a lot, and I just think that this version of the song really does capture that kind of like Western sound that Brian and Van Dyke Parks were going for with this one. I also really love that outro with the strings and the harmonica at the end. I think that the single version honestly suffers quite a bit without that being there, like how the single version just kind of ends, where on this one, you've got that really impressive string fade at the end. So I really like that a lot. In terms of like just judging the song like in the band's discography, I still wouldn't say it's like an absolute favorite of mine in the catalog, but considering like the songs that came out of the Smile sessions, this is definitely a highlight for me. So I just think it has a really cool arrangement. And I think that, Brian's production work on this really carries the song for me. And then I'll also say too, for a while I kind of struggled a little bit with the big shift between the verse and the chorus, like the heroes and villains. But honestly, over time, that chorus has grown on me quite a bit. It has kind of like that, like kind of like underlying like psychedelic sound to it, which I really like. It's just very haunting, and that's a word I'm probably going to use throughout this episode. It's haunting because a lot of these songs definitely have kind of an underlying haunting sound to them, which I think adds a lot. So very cool recording.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite Beach Boys songs, just period. There's a lot I've already said about it, and I think so. I'm not gonna really go into it, but I think Nate said it best. Very cinematic. It's drives home that Americana, like manifested destiny kind of theme going on here. I really love that cantina part that's part of this specific version. So I do prefer this version. I really like listening to it after G and Our Prayer because I think it has a great flow to it. Yeah, very cinematic. I like all versions of this song, but this version is probably my favorite. But there's nothing else that hasn't been said already by me or you guys tonight. So
Yeah, this song has definitely grown on me a bit. I never like outright disliked it, but it for a while was never really one that I really liked. But I do like this version the best. Especially like I do agree that middle section with the in the cantina margaritas, keep the spirit high is probably my favorite part of the song. Like you guys said, very has that psychedelic vibe. Using the Disneyland analogy again, this is the Frontierland song.
Hell yeah.
Because yeah, you kind of have like that Western ambience to it. Very, very,
Imagine listening to this on Big Thunder.
yeah.
It would
Or
be a top tier experience.
the Country Bear Jamboree sang it, right? I think
Yeah.
that's a Disney World. But yeah, it's a really cool track, and there's a lot of cool experimentation going on, and I really enjoy it. It's definitely grown on me quite a bit over the years.
Nate, when the ride stops, they go, "You're under arrest."
Yeah.
At the very end, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
swear, when I listen to this song, I feel like I gotta dodge bullets and I can smell the horses, and it's like so immersive that it like even if you're not paying attention to the words, it feels like it makes you think of the Old West.
Yeah.
And that bass line is hypnotic. I could just listen to that verse section on loop forever. That bong, ba bong, ba 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 ba. It's River Deep Mountain High, but it's so good.
And
Yeah.
I never knew it was River Deep Mountain High. And learned something new tonight.
If you listen to this, there's a million versions of that song, but if you listen to the original Phil Spector version, it's like you'll instantly hear it. The bass line and the chords are like practically the same.
Hmm.
Yeah, and
Um,
just in general, like talking about this song, as Beach Boys fans, we're all like just so familiar with it. But like really, like Brian releasing this as a single at the time, like you look at music around that time, and like there just wasn't a lot that really sounded like this, Like even Good Vibrations just sounds very like distinctively different from this, In terms of these songs that have like these like very abrupt, stops and like transitions, kind of like out of nowhere. One of the only songs I can think of that's like this is the song Some Velvet Morning by Lee Hazelwood and Nancy Sinatra. That one also has these very abrupt, like cinematic, almost like transitions where like the song completely changes vibes like between the verse and the chorus. But it
A Day in
worked.
the Life is the
Yeah.
only other one I could think
That's
of
that,
that was
that's
just
that's
Data
another
Life.
one
yeah.
too.
That's the
Yeah.
first that came to mind for me, where it's like, yeah, because that I would say that Good Vibration and Day in the Life were probably two of the first really big songs that were like kind of had the different segments. I know people like to say, oh, it was Bohemian Rhapsody, blah blah blah, whatever. Like I was saying, it's like, yeah, where they kind of popularized that.
Put a gun against Riley's head. You pulled the trigger. Now he's dead. Good job, Matt. All right, Nate, do you want to lead us into the next track on Smile?
Yeah, so this one's if if Heroes and Villains is taking you through the Old West, Do You Like Worms is like a detour to the islands of Hawaii, and it's after the chaos of heroes and villains, for much of the song a bit more blissful, and you kind of hear the blueprint for Little Pad, which would eventually come out.
Yeah.
You see Brian starting to use that kind of chord progression and melody that he would eventually turn into Little Pad. Um, but yeah, again, the production is so creative. And just to comment on the Beach Boys version, it's largely missing words. And, those words would eventually be filled in on Brian Wilson's solo version, which makes the song a bit more cohesive. But I love the Beach Boys version. I think it's really atmospheric. And one of my favorite things about it is that really gnarly buzz bass. If I recall correctly, I think it was probably played by Carol Kay or Ray Pullman. Um, and yeah, it's at times kind of like downright heavy, and then at times it's like totally blissful. And so it's a really, really cool piece of music. And for me, the highlight is I'm gonna butcher it. I was listening to it on the plane today, but I'm gonna butcher it. The Lahanalule,
Yeah.
Lahanalula,
Yeah.
Kini Nakapua.
Yeah.
Love that part.
Yeah, before I share my thoughts on this, I wanted to mention too, like, Nate mentioned the fuzz bass. I forgot like how prominent that is throughout this album. Like there's multiple tracks that feature it, and I really love the sound of it. I think that it adds quite a bit to the songs that it's used on. But yeah, in terms of Do You Like Worms, this is one of those tracks in the album that used to not do like anything for me at all, but re-listening to it, I can definitely hear more of the appeal. I really like the tech piano and the harpsichord sound on this. Again, it kind of gives it that very like haunting and kind of trippy sound when you're listening to it. And of course, like Nate mentioned too, I really like Brian's like vocal chant at the end with the woo-hallelujah, woo-hallelujah, and the backing vocals too. I still wouldn't say this is like a huge favorite of mine by any means, and this is definitely not one that like I really would see myself revisiting by itself very often. But I will say that I'm glad that I re-listened to it because I definitely can appreciate it a lot more now. And then the last thing I want to mention too is that it is so weird that according to David Leaf, that in 1978, Bruce said that at one point James Guercio was
Yeah.
considering opening the LA Light album with Rock Plymouth Rock, Do You Like Worms? Like, what in the hell? Like, I understand, like, the band had already released a lot of Smile like pieces by this point, throughout the 70s, but like, you think of LA and like, what the hell? How the hell would this have fit on there?
Not a fit.
Such a
I would
weird.
pay an ungodly amount of money to hear a Brucified version of Do You Like Worms? Like a
Wow.
la Endless Harmony. That would be insane.
Did he want to use the whole song or just the Rock Plymouth Rock part? Did they say?
I don't remember hearing. I
God
just
only
know that
knows.
they were planning on doing some sort of version of that to open the album of this song. So who knows? But
It doesn't fit. That's like a soft rock album. But
Yeah, it's like
imagine, do you like Worms straight into Lady Linda?
I could see Lady Linda straight into Do You Like Worms, not the other way
They
around.
both have the harpsichord.
Yeah,
Maybe there could have been some way to pull it off.
but no Good Timin'?
Yeah, good thing that one came out. That's the namesake.
Yeah, no kidding, man. Uh, I like this one. We kind of I like the bass on this one, and again, like Jake said, it's kind of throughout it, but I really like the bass on this one. I really like the part where it's kind of mostly just bass, drum, and the wahoo. I think we all mentioned that part, but it is very, very cool, and it is a great like transition song to kind of continue the theme, running through like with the with Heroes and Villains, Americana, and that kind of Manifest Destiny thing. And I think it's funny how Nate kind of made that connection. It's like we went out to California and Heroes and Villains, and now we're going further west. We're going to Hawaii, which is pretty cool. It's a great transition track, and I think like had this been pieced together fully, this would have been a great way to kind of continue that Heroes and Villains motif kind of thing. So I do really like it. I don't think I'll ever listen to it on its own though, only if it's like in this context.
Oh, and the bicycle riders section kicks ass too. I can't believe I forgot to mention that. But
Yeah.
we went from Frontierland to Adventureland, right? Anyway, going back to this song.
keep this up. I love the Disney
I
references.
can't. This is probably the last Disney one because I can't think of anything else that's gonna fit. But
Oh, just you wait.
this This I agree. I don't know if it really works outside of the thing, but like in the context, it works well. It's a good transition piece. Yeah, the fuzz bass, awesome harpsichord. Yeah, I like the melody on the bicycle rider. Like that has a good melody. And then yeah, I think the best part is the Mahalalule, la 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 la, da 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 da. Yeah, pretty catchy song. I just wish it was fleshed out a bit more. It does go on a little long for me too. It's like 4 minutes or whatever. I know it's a
Yeah.
little, but like I said, I like it. I like it as a transition piece. It works well there.
All
All
right.
right, so for the um next track we're moving into, it's actually we're lumping in a few different tracks here. So we're going to be talking about I'm in Great Shape, Barnyard, and You're My Only Sunshine. So I guess for me, just to go through them, I'm in great shape. What stands out to me the most is the really remarkable melody again. Brian was just so on fire with his melodies at this time, and they're so unorthodox, and they're so far removed from the Chuck Berry inspired melodies of a year or two prior. They're very far out stuff. Like to me, this I'm in great shape almost sounds like it could be like a Miles Davis record or something like that. Like you almost hear a bit of a like a bebop influence. Um, so yeah, for me, I couldn't tell you what I'm in great shape is about, but I love that melody and can just listen to it over and over again. Then it goes into Barnyard, which again, like talking about the cinematic thing, like it just paints such a picture of, you're in a barnyard, farm, zoo, whatever you want to think, surrounded by animals. Um, and there's a the legend of the sessions where Brian was making everybody make animal noises, and Bruce talked about that like it was his Vietnam. Like like there's like some interviews out there where Bruce was like shuddering, like remembering those sessions. And I do think the band was like getting a little freaked out by this point where like the things were getting so far out. But to me, Barnyard is like a really remarkable piece of music. And then finally, My Only Sunshine is such a creative take on the song. This is one that Phil Spector did with the Righteous Brothers in 1965 on their Just Once in My Life album. And knowing what a Spector nut Brian was, I'm sure he heard it. But what's really unique about his version is he reharmonizes the song into a minor key. Normally it's sung in a major key, but Brian makes it minor, which just adds this haunting, really profoundly sad effect to the song. And we always talk about what a great singer Dennis was, and we should have brought this up on the Dennis episode, but Dennis's lead vocal on the My Only Sunshine portion is really just perfect, right on the money. So I love all three of these.
Yeah, first off, in terms of that Bruce thing you were talking about, yeah, his quote about it was he said, the music was cool, but it's always tinged with the reality of making it. Brian degraded us, made us lay down for hours and make barnyard noises, demoralized us, freaked us out. I can't tell you a lot of it. It's really fucked up. He thought it was hilarious. He was stoned and laughing. So yeah, like you said, Nate, it's really describing this like it was like the worst thing of his life. But
Literally. And this is coming from a guy that saw someone get shot.
right.
And he talks about the smile sessions like it was worse than witnessing a
Yeah,
murder.
yeah. But yeah, in terms of these tracks, so I'm in great shape. This is kind of like like a fragment. Like Nate said, like the melody is really quirky and unique. It's definitely a very interesting sounding thing, but can't say it does too much for me. For me, it's just kind of like it's a fragment on here. Barnyard again is also kind of like a shorter fragment. I think it's like less than a minute long, but I actually really dig this one quite a bit. I really love the backing vocals and the harmonies on this, like the I just think that it sounds really cool. And I wrote that like my description of this track, like if I were to use a word to describe it, I just call it a groove. It's just a total groove of a track. So I really like Barnyard quite a bit. And then My Only Sunshine, the old master painter, like Nate said, it's like a more like kind of like creepier sounding recording of, You're My Only Sunshine with Dennis on lead. I can see like, you saying like, it kind of gives off like a kind of a cool vibe with the song being in like a minor key. And I do think that Dennis's vocal is nice, but can't say it does a whole lot for me. This is one of the tracks on here that just doesn't still really click with me at all. But I respect it for what it is, and I can definitely see what Brian was going for with it. But yeah, those are pretty much my thoughts on these tracks. Definitely of the group, Barnyard is definitely my favorite.
I think this is kind of where I fall off a little bit. Like I like all of the individual parts, but I'm in great shape's like 30 seconds. Barnyard's like a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And like My Only Sunshine, Old Master Painter, they're just it's very scattered and doesn't it seems very unfocused. So like once I'm getting really into they all like work together well, I guess. Like you can if you put all of these together and labeled it like as one song, I probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but the fact that I do kind of matters to me, I guess. And the fact that I know that this is like six different like fragments pieced together kind of almost randomly makes it seem very unfocused. But as is, I think the music is still very incredible. And yeah, that I like that "You Are My Sunshine" part. I think that Nate, you pointed out as in minor key. I was gonna say the exact same thing. It's really cool, I guess. Not really like haunting. It's just cool. And I like the part of that kind of comes back a couple times. But
So for me, I would say starting with "I'm in Great Shape." That has a pretty cool melody, and I kind of like the lyric, "Look at me jump, I'm in the great shape of the agriculture." Then you go into "Barnyard," which I think has a really killer backing track. Um, and I also like the lyric where it's like, "Jump in the pig pen. Next time I'll leave my shoes on or take my shoes on." I know it's different depending on which version you're listening to. I think the lyrics are slightly different on the Brian Wilson version. "Jump in the pig pen. Next time I'll take my shoes off." I kind of like that lyric. And then as far as "You Are My Sunshine," I like I don't know if it's like a violin or whatever it is, that like kind of string instrument. And then Dennis's vocal sounds pretty good on it. Um, yeah, as a whole, I I guess it flows kind of cool, but like I don't really think it stands alone as anything. Like it just kind of like works well on the album itself. I really wouldn't consider this like these three as like, oh, this is a track. This is just like a bunch of segues as far as I'm concerned to lead to the next song, which I guess is what they were going for.
I know
Um,
Nate. There was like I know like when they were making the album, there was like an intended like Barnyard suite, right? Like were these originally like if they were like completely finished, these were gonna go together, right? To some degree, or
um, who's to say? I'm not totally sure, but I think you're on the right track. I think um, I really actually do think Brian's 2004 version is a safe approximation of what they were going for, especially since you had Van Dyke's input as well. So yeah, I think it's pretty safe to come to that conclusion.
Mhm.
And a few more things that popped into my head as we were discussing the songs is "Call Me Crazy," but the da 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 from Barnyard is one of my favorite Brian Wilson melodies. It's kind of almost like proto shortening bread, and that it's like very simple, very repetitive, but just like so damn catchy. And then the Master Painter section of the "You Are My Only Sunshine," that cello piece, ba 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 ba. To me, that's like straight Beethoven. Like to me, that could stand up against any like big classical piece. And I wish I could hear that little fragment expanded into a whole classical piece meant for orchestra. Because to me, it sounds a lot like, and I'm not such a classical nut where I know all the names, but Beethoven's ba 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 ba, and then you have Brian doing the ba 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 ba. It's kind of a take on like a Beethoven kind of thing. So just so much musical brilliance going on in such a small amount of time that it kind of goes over your head. But then sometimes for me, like it took a long time for this music to sink in. And so a lot of it I used to not care for. And then the more I listened to it and really started to fall in love with the different segments and pieces, I was like, oh wow, this is really beautiful stuff.
All right,
So
Nate.
yeah,
Cabinet timely hello.
um Well, shout out to David Beard because this is David Beard's number one favorite Beach Boys song. Um, and yeah, I think this is just obviously a point of tension for the band in terms of the making of the album. This was, as most fans know, the song that led to the confrontation between Mike and Van Dyke. But that aside, I think it's an incredible piece of art. The lyrics really paint a picture, like you can say about many of these songs. And it's one of the most unique arrangements I've ever heard. It uses a really cool combination of different instruments from around the world, like what I guess you'd call like exotic instrumentation. It's no longer two two Stratocasters and a P bass and a drum set. It's, really, really unique combinations of instruments. And, we're going to keep bringing this up too, but that fuzz bass is incredible on this one. It
Mhm.
sounds a lot like a Satisfaction. So really the song is just not to make this comparison again, but it's like an incredible painting or series of paintings. And yeah, just some of the most beautiful music I've ever heard. It's very haunting, and the chorus is almost disorienting, like the chorus, the way that it's almost polyrhythmic in the way that like different time signatures are being used simultaneously. And I think of this chorus as like the scene in Wizard of Oz when Dorothy gets swept up in the tornado. To me, like this is like the musical equivalent of that. You're just, when you listen to it, you feel like you're spinning around and you can't catch your balance. So it's just showcases Brian's amazing ability to make you feel different things through his work.
Yeah, so we talked about this one obviously on our 2020 episode as well, but yeah, for me, this is definitely one of the highlights of the Smile sessions, and this is one of those ones that I feel like has really, really grown on me even since we did that 2020 episode. I just really love the way that this song shifts, from that very peaceful, like folky sounding opening with the banjo and Carl's really smooth vocal, and then you get that really explosive and driving chorus section that Nate was talking about, like with the "Who ran the Iron Horse." Especially love the use of the fuzz bass on that, like Nate mentioned, and also the cellos. And then in the background, you have those like ascending and descending backing vocals, which are just like otherworldly, like the like I can't imagine how long it took them to like get those right, but like sounds really, really impressive. And I think that it really adds to like kind of the frantic sound of the track. The outro as well is very cool. Like the over and over, the crow cries and cover the cornfield. Even though, Mike did not care for the lyrics at all, you got to give him credit for giving a really great vocal on that.
One of his
And
best vocals.
Yeah, and I just think it's a really fitting way to close out the track. And yeah, like Nate said, this is one of those ones where like, it's another one of those cinematic songs, where it's like you had the really peaceful opening, like the home on the range, and then you got like the driving like chorus, like it's like a train going down the tracks, it's just like a really, really impressive sounding song. So really like this one a lot, and this is one where I would definitely recommend listening to the session highlights from the Smile Sessions box set if you haven't already, because I just think that it's really cool hearing Brian and the Wrecking Crew working on this, and putting it together. So really like Cabin Essence a lot.
Sorry. Yeah, Cabernet has really grown on me since we started this. It's a pretty heavy and intense track, and I think it works really well with all the dynamics going on. You kind of
Mhm.
start off very slow, very mellow. Um, and it kind of feels like, like literally lighting a candle inside like a log cabin, like at night, like that kind of Americana kind of feel.
Yeah.
And, I think this is the one where Van Dyke's lyrics really work towards the benefit of the song. He's using a lot of Americana words, I guess, like crows and candles, and just very like he really paints the picture really well compared to some of the other ones, and I'll get to some of those later. But I think that his lyrics really serve this one well. And yeah, those descending and ascending vocals, I was gonna say that too. That I don't even think I could do that. I don't think a lot of people can. It was very impressive. Um, and I think that over and over the crow cross and cover the cornfield part by Mike is again he sang that really well. I know you guys mentioned that. Um, yeah, it's just a really cool one. It's just a really cool track, it's like maybe the best like middle of an album track that you could ask for. It's just continues the themes, but also just stands out on its own. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'll be brief because then we talked about this one before. I really like this track. I like the different segments of it. I like the banjo. I like the lyric. And my favorite lyric is the like the lamp and fire mellow. I think that just really sets the whole tone. And kind of like the I like the dissonance between like the pretty like kind of like crazy like kind of like compressed like the who ran the iron horse and then like the more mellow kind of like verses and then of course the crow cries uncover the cornfield and all that. That's a great outro, and Mike does sing it well despite the big debate it caused. So I'm quite a big fan of Cabanescence both on here. This is one I feel really does stand alone well, especially because I know it first appeared on 2020 and it works as a great closer on that album as well too.
I also want to mention too, I don't think any of you guys mentioned this, but during that, the more peaceful verse section, like you have like the doing doing. I think it's kind of cool. Like they're using like the backing vocals as almost like another instrument, along with like the banjos and stuff, which I think is pretty cool. So,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For
all
Yeah,
sure.
right.
that coda is totally one of Mike's best vocals. And then one other thing I think is really cool is that we all mentioned it, but the motif in the chorus of the little chromatic thing comes back later in Fire with
That's
but
for
this
oh
time
yeah.
it's played by the instruments. But we always talk about Smile having all these motifs, and that's actually one of them, even though it's just chromaticism. Um, so yeah, continuing on, it's totally a change of pace now. Um, you go from the very chaotic, visceral Cabanescence to Wonderful, which is almost like a dream or like an Alice in Wonderland kind of experience. Very like simultaneously psychedelic, and you kind of really feel the LSD influence. Um, but at the same time, it's very classical, and like you could really put this up against a Mozart composition, and no one would blink an eye. Like it's very, very sophisticated musically, and it's arranged in a very classically informed way. So yeah, it's really great, and gosh, like someone should take a shot every time we mention Disney in these podcasts. But to me, this one has such a Disney element to it. And I can't put my finger on it exactly beyond uh like making the comparison to Alice in Wonderland. Um, but yeah, I could almost see this in like a musical. Like it's just so gorgeous that you could really see it in that setting.
It's so wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a very pretty ballad. I really love the harpsichord playing on this and Brian's vocal. I think it's a very like tender and effective vocal. I'll be honest, I've never been quite as enthusiastic about this one as a lot of fans seem to be. I know a lot of people like really rave about this one. For me, it's like one of those songs like I like it. I definitely see the appeal and like I'll come back to it from time to time, but it's not one that like I rank up there with my all-time favorites from the band. But very pretty ballad, and it's cool that the band would sometimes, I believe, they pull this out live in the '70s sometimes, right? Nate?
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah,
and in the 90s too.
yeah, yeah,
Dude, put it with the Flame song,
yeah.
Don't Worry,
Don't
Bill.
worry, Bill. Yeah,
I think Mike introduced it as a sometimes we call this Wonder Bill.
Wonder Bill.
That's just like the 70s too. Yeah, kind of with Jake on this. I don't really see the hype as much. Like, I think I do like this one much more. Not necessarily much more, but I like this a little bit more than the one on Smile. I think it's a bit more fleshed out here than it is there, even though that was deliberately stripped back.
Yeah.
Oh, the one on
Um,
Smiley Smile, you're saying?
Smiley, Smiley, yeah, that's what I meant. And I think it's a pretty complex song, but that doesn't necessarily make it like a favorite for me. Like, just because the song is complex doesn't mean I'm gonna like it right away. And it's grown on me, and I really like it in the context of the record, and I think it sounds really cool with the arrangements on this one. Sounds a bit more clean, a bit more fleshed out, and it's still a pretty cool track, but I'll just never really return to it on its own. So
Um, Honestly, might be my favorite song on the album. I think it's
Let's
gorgeous.
go.
I think it's gorgeous. I think it's absolutely, I mean, the arrangement is gorgeous. It's got that beautiful Baroque chamber pop feel. Brian's vocal on it is incredible. Then you have like the harpsichord is gorgeous. You have like the trumpet and everything that just works so well. And I just really like the lyrics. I think it's like one of those songs that like is a very beautiful song, but I think the lyrics kind of have like that darkness to them in a way. There's kind of like the dichotomy between like the backing track and the lyrics. I think it's really gorgeous, honestly. I really, really enjoy this song a lot. I would say it's probably my favorite of like the I'm not like not including the stuff like Surfs Up and like in the sense that like I would say like how do I want to say this? It's probably my favorite track that I mainly associate with Smile in the sense that it never really got a release on another studio album because like Surfs Up showed up on Surfs Up, Cabin Essence is on 2020. I know this was on Smiley Smile, but that's a completely different arrangement. Like as far as like
Yeah.
in the arrangement, I really love it. I really, really love this song.
Yeah, even the melody and the chords are different on the Smiley Smile version.
Hmm.
Um, I do love on the Brian Wilson version, him and Jeffrey Foskett sang this one in like unison and like doubling each other, and they have a really, really great blend on that recording of the song. Um, so moving along, there's a type of composition in musical theater. Quite often you see it in theater as well as classical music called an overture. And that usually plays at the beginning of a of an act of a show or of a movement in classical music. And it's a way to introduce you to all the motifs and different melodies that will appear throughout the piece. And it kind of cycles through them and prepares you for the actual songs that are up ahead. And so I'll always kind of view the Look, Song for the Children, and Child is the Father of the Man as the overture, just borrow that term for Surf's Up. And I can never think of these songs separately from Surf's Up. I kind of think of them as all one movement, so to speak. And so both of those tracks introduce you to different motifs that will appear in Surf's Up and that whole section of the record. And yeah, just really great stuff. Great vocals and great playing by the Wrecking Crew. And obviously incredible composition by Brian. You're really seeing Brian move away from, you know, Be True to Your School, 409, Surf and Safari are all ideas contained in a 2.5 minute record. And you get to the Smile stuff, and he again doing something that resembles classical overtures and bringing motifs back. And it's very far removed from rock and roll 45 singles, you know. So really cool section of the album.
Yeah, so in terms of these two tracks, starting with Look, Song for Children, this is one of those ones where like it's clearly not done listening to it, but I do like what is there. Like some of the other songs, I really love the harpsichord on this. I think there's also, is there glockenspiel on this too? Nate, I really like that
Yes.
too. And then I also really like that little piano section about a minute into the track, where like it's kind of like just like isolated. I think that that has a very haunting sound to it. I will say I actually do prefer this incomplete version to the Brian Wilson Presents Smile one. I know like it's cool that like they finish it and added more added the lyrics and stuff, but honestly like I do prefer this kind of original arrangement. I do wish that it was finished. And then in terms of Child is the Father of the Man, I think this is a pretty cool track. I really dig the opening with the guy's vocals, with the piano and the trumpet. The highlight for me though is definitely that chorus section. I think it just has a very like otherworldly sound to it. You have that really like cool instrumental in the background, and then the guy's vocals with the child's the father of the man. Just has a very cool sound to it. So that one has really grown on me a lot since I last heard it. That used to be something that like I would never really revisit on its own, but now I honestly might come back to it from time to time. So, and then also lastly, it's also worth mentioning that parts of that song, Child is the Father of Man, the band pulled that out of the archives when they were finishing Surfs Up for the Surfs Up album, and they added that, to the outro. So that's worth mentioning as well. So.
Yeah, these are both pretty cool. And Nate, I know you said overtures and undertures are not necessarily like popular in music, but The Who are also pretty notable for using those in a lot of their albums. So it's not a concept that I'm completely new to, because they did that. They actually in Tommy had a whole like 10-minute underture, which is a little annoying sometimes when listening to the album, because it's like 10 minutes. Um, but not something I'm not used to. And I think it's pretty cool here. I think my only problem with it is it kind of both seem like a little unfocused next to each other. Um, having like two different overture undertures like immediately one following the other. I think that you could either combine them or you can just pick one. Part of the reason why this is one of the main like reasons why I actually like kind of see this as more just a compilation rather than like real album because they could have like three different like musical like you know I guess like for lack of a better term like overtures next to each other and just pick one or combine them. That being said, each of the sections are really cool. I like the guitar and look. That part's pretty cool. And I do like that child is father of the man part that they recycled for Surf's Up.
Yeah.
If I were to say like pick one, I would definitely pick Child is Father of the Man. That one
Mhm.
just seems a bit more focused than the other one. It definitely serves its purpose going right before Surf's Up too, because it really just kind of like an intro for it. Both are really cool, but having them next to each other is just a little unfocused and kind of takes me out a little bit, but still very impressively like pieced together and very impressively like arranged.
Yeah, I would say for me, the highlight of this is definitely the child, father of the man. That's pretty catchy. Yeah, as a whole, I kind of agree with you, Riley, a little unfocused, but I do think it works well here, as in like kind of an overture transition piece. I probably wouldn't choose to put it on outside of the context of the Smile record, but it does work here.
I feel like Riley, it's one of those ones, in terms of like child is the father of the man. It's one of those ones where like if you heard this in like a snippet online, you'd be like, oh damn, this is really cool. I want to hear the full song that this goes with. And then
That's the
you're
full
like,
song.
oh, that's the song. But it was again reused for Surf's Up and used very effectively there. So
Speaking of Surf's Up,
yeah,
we're going to that one now.
It's not a song
And
about surfing either.
tell them they did Ruins Domino, baby.
yeah, it's really clever on Brian and Van Dyke's part to I hate to make the comparison, but it's like almost like, remember those Rick rolls where you think you're getting one thing and you're really getting another? That's totally, I feel like what Surf's Up in effect is. Like I even remember getting into the band and being like, oh, Surf's Up, let's go. Another surf song and listen to it and being like, whoa, what is this? Um, but yeah, I mean, there's a reason that Leonard frickin' Bernstein had Brian on his TV special to perform this song. Like, there's a reason that out of all the songs that Brian could have sung, that this was what he did because, gosh, I mean, one of the greatest pieces of music of all time, and it's just so lush and tender and combines so many different musical ideas, and yet kind of remains simple. Like Brian could have totally gone to town with this arrangement and done a good vibrations, Phil Spector kind of thing, but instead it's primarily just Brian's piano playing, and then you have those really cool horns, obviously, and those different embellishments, but primarily it's a piano and vocal piece. And yeah, it just features, depending on which version you're listening to, some of Brian and Carl's greatest singing. And of course, the band's incredible outro, which Carl and Bruce kind of tacked on at the end in the 70s. But what a perfect, literally perfect piece of music. And I think it's really, really cool that Al has continued to have this in a lot of his set lists.
Yeah.
Because God knows out of all the tunes, this is probably not one that Mike would play very often. They have played it, Mike and Bruce, in the UK a few times, but it's really cool that I think Al deliberately has exposed this song to a wider audience through including it in a lot of his like Endless Summer Greatest Hit shows with Matthew singing. And yeah, his son Matt just does an incredible job on this song too, which is worth checking out.
Yeah. I've seen them do it live before. It's very, very cool. And you can, when they do it, depending on the venue you're seeing Al at, you can kind of tell like a lot of people don't know what the hell it is, but like as a big fan, it's very cool to hear it live, to this day. So, yeah,
When
in
I
terms
saw
of,
Al played it, he played the upright bass on while they were performing the song, and that was just unreal.
yeah, in terms of this song, pretty much everything you said, Nate, it's an incredible track, definitely a masterpiece. Musically, production wise, really haunting arrangement to it. Brian's vocal is great. The outro, like you said, with the guy's vocals, like with the a children's song, like such a cool arrangement. I will say though, my hot take on this one is that I've always preferred the Surfs Up version. And
Oh, me too.
re-listening to it, I definitely still hold that opinion. I think Brian's verse vocal on this one is great, and I do really think that he sounds awesome on the Colonnaded Ruins Domino part. That's the one part where I do think he beats Carl's vocal from the Surf's Up version. But I will say though, yeah, the Surf's Up album version to me, it just sounds more full to my ears, like production wise, and that's why it works better for me. So, yeah, regardless of the version, it's a great song, and it's one of those ones that, like you said, Nate, it's funny because the title, you if you're a casual fan, you think, oh, Surf's Up, cool, surf song, and then you hear it, and like from the opening lyric, and like through the verses, like hung velvet overtaken me, dim chandelier awaken me. Like it could not be any farther from the band's earlier sound. So really cool track, and it's cool that Al will still do this one to this day, like Nate said.
Yeah, I remember the first time I found this one through the Surf's Up album. I'm like, oh, cool. This is gonna be some sort of like 70s take on their surf stuff. And I was like, nope. But damn, it is a good song. For a while I haven't listened to this one in a long time. I honestly think like attentively since like what? Like not our Surf's Up episode, but like around that time. It's been a
Wow.
long time.
Wow.
Y- Dude, it's just a hard song. You really have to sit down and listen to it. I can't like be in the car, just drive and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna play Surf's Up." It's like such a downer of a song to like put on in the car. Um,
Wait, Mike.
yeah, no, that's a good word though. I like using the word downer. He's kind of, but dude, coming back to it, I'm like, yeah, this is about as good as I remember it being. Um, saying Ryan really hits that columnated
Oh
roof.
God, so
He
good.
hits that note so good. It's so smooth. Like I'm ready for his voice to crack, but it doesn't. Especially lately hearing a lot of his like 70s stuff. So I was like, oh my God, his voice is about to get shot. Nope. He really hits that note. But I'm with you, Jake. I actually prefer the Carl vocal on it,
Hmm.
minus that columnated rooms domino
Yep,
part.
that's the one part. That's the one part. Yeah.
I don't know. I just think that's what I'm used to because this one is kind of like it's not slapped together. It was meticulously pieced together, but it's like a bunch of different recordings kind of pieced together. You have obviously like the piano demo from like 66, 67, with Brian vocal from that, I believe. And then you have some of the Carl backing vocals from the 70s, and then you have the child is the father, the man part from like the other songs. So it is like a Frankenstein of a song. Um, Compared to the 70s one, which is kind of a little less Frankenstein of a song. By the way, it's as good as everybody says it is, though. It's just I don't know. It's just great. It is a masterpiece. Like I mean, it might not be my favorite Beach Boys song, might not even be in my top 20, but I think there could be an objective way of looking at this as just a really well written song.
Yeah, this is a gorgeous song. The backing track is great. I especially love like the horns and everything, and the glockenspiel and all that. Yeah, as far as which version I prefer, I kind of am with you guys, whereas like I think that Brian sings the falsetto better, but I think I like the Carl version better. The song feels a little bit more fleshed out in that version. But like I said, it's a great song regardless of what version. And then yeah, I think my favorite lyric is a blind class aristocracy back through the opera glass you see. I was not expecting a lyric about class structure from the Beach Boys, but what do you know? Yeah, exactly. Like I think that's like the ultimate irony is like it's called Surfs Up, and the song has absolutely nothing to do with surfing. But great song.
I think you could interpret it almost as like not instead of like like surfs up, dude. It's more like the surfs up. That's always how I've kind of viewed it. In terms of
Whoa, I never pieced that together.
yeah. Somebody mentioned that a long time ago on like probably on the Reddit page or something. And I was like, that makes sense. All
Yeah, I'm
right.
with you guys on preferring the 70s version. And for me, the make or break isn't actually the vocal, but it's the Moog synth that they added on the 70s version that kind of bridges the gaps between the sections.
Mhm.
I think that really like makes it feel like one piece compared to like different ideas stitched together. So yeah, rolling into the next pairing of tracks, we've got I Want to Be Around and Workshop. And I Want to Be Around to me is kind of like Brian's ode to the kind of music that Murray liked and the kind of music that Murray made. Um,
Kentucky
and
Fried.
yeah, it's yeah, not quite like that, but it's like straight up 50s, like there's like a term for it, like cool jazz, or like some people call it like LA jazz.
Loungy. It's very loungy.
Yeah. To me it almost sounds Burt Bacharach influenced as
Yeah.
well. Like I could picture a Bacharach song on top of it. Um, and then you get to Workshop, which is the greatest song ever written and the greatest song the Beach Boys ever made. No, I'm kidding. Um, yeah, Workshop is exactly what it says it's going to be, and it's just workshop noises. Um, and out of all the Smile pieces of music or or noise to resurrect, um, oddly enough, they just God only knows what made them make this decision, but they decided to tack it a workshop sound effect compilation on the end of a surf song, with Do It Again a few years later, um, which is so out of left field. But I always kind of had a charm to it where to me, I always imagined that it was the guys that make the surfboards, like in the, I don't know, surfboard factory or whatever you'd call it. That's kind of always the mental image that came to my mind when I first heard the workshop thing at the end. Um, so yeah, those are what come to mind for me on those tracks.
Damn, I never knew that.
What, the
Never knew
workshop
what.
thing?
Yeah, I never knew that.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
yeah,
not on the 45 version, but it's
on
on
the
the
album
2020
version.
album version.
That's what
If
I,
you
Yeah.
listen to
that's the
the
one I
whole
go
song,
to.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you listen to the
Yeah.
whole song at the end, it turns into Workshop.
So Riley, you never like heard that and thought to yourself like, why the hell are there workshop noises at the end and do it again?
Not really. I kind of well, first of all, it kind of sounds similar to like the drum thing they had going, so I kind of
Oh,
blended.
that's I get what you're saying. Yeah, yeah.
And then like I don't know. I mean, I'm similar with Nate. I kind of always just pictured it as more like a stylistic choice. Like I don't know what I exactly thought it was. I kind of related it more to like cars, like somebody
Oh, I
working
could
in a
see
car
that.
or something, or like not
Oh
necessarily
yeah, it
the engine
could be
starting, but
someone
with
working
the
on their
drums
hot
going.
rod.
Well, first of all, I always thought the drums kind of meant were like mechanical almost to sound like a car, I guess, if that makes any sort of sense with the way my
That's so
brain's.
cool. That's so
And
fucking
then
cool.
I kind of always just pictured it like, oh, some guys like drilling a tire into a car or something. I was never like, oh, that's workshop from the Smile Sessions.
So it should have been for you. It would be auto shop.
Yes, auto shop. Yes.
That's actually such a cool interpretation of it. That kind of blew my mind.
I like Nate's with the surfboard shop. I feel like Mike would be like, it's a good idea. Write a song about a surfboard.
Yeah.
I'm surprised they never actually did that.
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of these songs, or I guess I want to be around plus workshop. Yeah, I want to be around. Like I said, when Nate was talking, it kind of has like a loungy sound to it, which I think is pretty nice. I definitely hear like kind of the Bacharach sound that Nate's comparing it to. But yeah, it's one of those tracks. It's just kind of there for me. It's not one that like I would probably revisit outside of listening to this material. And then workshop is from what I've read, it was Brian had a session going and he had the musicians basically recreating like construction sounds, using like different tools in the studio. So and again, why was it at the end of Do It Again? Who knows? Like, what was the story behind that? But obviously we have our own theories on that. So, yeah, this is one of these two tracks aren't really things that I revisit often, but they're I Want to Be Around is pleasant enough. So,
I want
Yeah,
to be around is like awesome, like 30 seconds of music. I wish that
yeah.
was like really fully realized to some degree. And it doesn't really like it shouldn't really work well with Workshop, but the transition they did, I don't know if that was like a tape splicing or whatever. It's smooth. And it works as a pretty cool intro to vegetables, but yeah, I don't think I'm ever gonna return to it.
Yeah.
It does see this is like one of those ones where it seems really unfinished. Like this is just like they're scrapping at ideas. Yeah.
Hmm.
So
does the one on Smile doesn't have the lyrics, right? That's the one on Brian Wilson.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I kind of like the one on the Brian Wilson Presents Smile where it kind of has like the I want to be around to pick up the piece when someone breaks your heart, and then the lady comes in your heart. Uh,
Yeah, it's so good.
that one is better. This is fine, I guess. I mean, like it's got like a nice little lounge feel to it. And then Workshop is basically just whatever. I mean, I don't
Matt,
know.
I was just reminded, oddly enough, after Dark Side of the Moon, Pink Floyd were like, for like, I think a little bit, they're like, we're gonna make an album of music strictly made out of kitchen appliances. So like kitchen appliances in like, silverware in like glass. That was an idea for the album.
Did they
And
ever?
as you can imagine, they scrapped it because that was stupid as fuck. Um,
Well, that like that reminds me of like you
and the only thing that remains of that album is the intro. Jake, do you know the intro to Shine On You Crazy Diamond where it
Yeah,
has
yeah, yeah.
Halo sound? That was like, you put your finger on a cup full of water, glass full of
Hmm.
water, kind of thing. That was the only thing that remained because that idea was stupid. So that's what this song reminds me of. I'm so
Yeah,
like it works.
I do
It
think
works like vegetables, but like that's it.
Workshop and like the dogs barking and Caroline No, some of those things I think sort of created that legend. I think some people in music circles, if you bring up the name Brian Wilson, they think of like that scene in what's that movie? I think it's called, I've never seen the whole thing, but Dewey
On
Cox,
Walk
something
Hard, the
like
Dewey
that.
Cox story.
Cox, yeah,
I have
walk
just
hard.
seen I've just seen that part where they parody Brian and like it's that scene where the guy's making all the like crazy noises in the studio. And I do think in like I said, in some music production circles, like that's what Brian is kind of, if you bring up Brian Wilson, that's where people think you're going with
Yeah,
it, you
he's like
know?
working with like a bunch of doohickeys.
Yeah, and it's like such a niche part of Brian's like overarching, catalog, but like it definitely made its mark in how people remember him, in terms of like the crazy studio experiments.
I don't I hate
All right, so
No, wait, I have a couple more thoughts. I was going to say, I hate to make another Disney reference, but this reminds me of like in the scene in Tarzan where they like make the trashing the camp. You've seen that movie, right? Where it's like they just like
mhm.
fuck around with the stuff and make music. That's like what you were telling me about. Like they making music out of glass and all that stuff. They were trying to do Pink Floyd. That's what I thought of. And then I'm thinking of like Metal Machine Music for some reason, how Lou Reed thought it was a good idea to release an hour-long album of guitar feedback. So,
Yep.
So rolling into the next song, I've said this on a few different songs before, but this is always one that to me, I hear it and I'm like, oh, this kind of sounds more like a Jane and Dean song than a Beach Boys song. And the funny thing is, I think Dean Torrance clearly felt the exact same way because he actually recorded his own version of the song with Brian and they released it as a Jane and Dean single later on. Um, but yeah, to me, obviously the song reflects Brian's whole health food kick, that little era of his life. And it's funny, he's quoted as saying like he didn't actually care to partake in eating healthy.
Yeah.
He just liked to tell other people to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and I've always interpreted vegetables as like a kind of clever wink wink nod to like smoking pot. Like to me, that's always been clear as day as how I interpreted it. And not too different than like Got to Get You Into My Life by the Beatles, where you wouldn't necessarily associate it right away, but once you know, you can't really unhear it. Um, but yeah, it's totally an incredible piece of music. It's almost in a similar vein to what nowadays we'd call like children's music,
Yeah.
like something you'd see in like a cartoon. Um, but it's really a lot going on, like the sophisticated harmonies and background vocals, and Al does a really good job on the lead. And um, you have Dennis actually playing the drums on this one a little bit. So Dennis actually did get to pick up the sticks a bit during the Smile sessions, which I'm sure made him happy. So yeah, it's a really classic song. And I do have to say, God, I was gonna say I prefer this version or that version, but I could not decide between this Smile version, the Smiley Smile version, which to me is has a beauty of its own with how the harmonies really shine. And then I do love Jane and Dean's version too, so it's hard for me to decide which would be my favorite.
Yeah, so Vegetables, this is another one of those songs that I remember I used to like not really care for at all. But over the past year or so, it's totally grown on me. I just think that it's really catchy and fun. Lyrically, the song is kind of goofy, like Nate said. But I do think that the words fit really well with like the music and the melody. I think the production on this one is what really elevates it for me, and it's also the reason why I prefer it to the Smiley Smile version. I think that the song just works better with the more full, like lush arrangement that it has here. I also think that the vocals are really great, both Brian and the group harmonies. I will say that I know that there was this idea that they should release this. I forget if it was Brian or Van Dyke who had the idea that they should release this as the album's lead single. I think that would have been a disaster. Uh, I just don't see how this would have done well. It's just really kind of out there and weird, but in the end, I do enjoy the song, and I do think that Nate's interpretation of it is probably correct in terms of like what the lyrics are getting at. I doubt it's actually necessarily about vegetables. I think it's more about, we're all fucked up together. We're all vegetables, so.
Brian was like, "How can I write about weed without Mike getting on my ass?"
Right. Mike's just like, oh, yeah, health food. Cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Hang on to your ego.
Yeah.
This is a druggy song, Brian. We're not doing songs about drugs, Brian.
Brian's like, all right, we'll make it about carrots.
This was pretty fun. I like this one a lot better than the one we got on Smiley
Smile,
Smile.
smile.
The Smiley Smile one has its place. Like it's cool. It's very stripped back. It's just like an organ, harmonies and bass. But this one, it's just it feels a lot more of a full song, and I think it's a little bit more upbeat too. I don't know if there's like a difference in tempo or not, but this one just has more energy to it, and it sells that kind of like funny kind of theme a lot more than that one on Smiley Smile does. I really like this one. What I don't like is that you can hear the chomping a little bit more. I hate that shit. Um, I don't like it. Like when my friends will be like chewing too loud in my ear, and I just tell them to stop, that kind of thing. But other than
Yeah, I
that,
hate
this
that
this
shit.
one's just a lot of fun. It's a very fun song, and it is actually one I do come back to from this one.
Yeah, this is a great song. This is very fun. I know there's like allegedly like Paul McCartney is on it. I don't think that's ever
I was
been.
gonna say it's the only song that if Riley said the chomping ruined it, probably the only song that Paul McCartney had a negative effect on.
Mhm. Allegedly, of course. Um, yeah, I like this one better too than the Smile Smile. It's a little bit more fleshed out. I like that they took the this one has the eat a lot, sleep a lot, brush a
Mhm.
lot, crazy that tag in there. Which I know that they later that was the one on What
Mama
Mama
says.
says,
Mama Says. Yeah, it was they later reused it for Mama Says, and for some reason when it was Mama Says, it was not credited to Van Dyke Parks. Don't know what that was all about. But yeah, no, this is a very fun, catchy song and always enjoyable. It's very like lighthearted, which I like because some of the songs on here are a little heavy.
Yeah, it honestly is like a pretty refreshing change of pace. I mean, I know like, you also have, the loungy I want to be around, shortly before this too. But like you said, a lot of really heavy stuff on here. Child is the father of the man and cabin essence and a lot of and surfs up. So like yeah, you get this fun kind of bouncy song with like, lyrics about vegetables. And my favorite part has always been in terms of like the melody, the part where he goes like if you da 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 da, and then like the carrot line and stuff. I think that that's just super catchy. So this is one that like it's funny because I went from like not caring for it at all, but like and now I'm at a point where it's like it gets stuck in my head sometimes. It's just a bop.
um, next one is Holidays, and I'm so sorry to do this again, but like this one has such a Disney vibe
Yeah,
to it
it
as
does.
well.
Totally does.
How we've been talking about the different areas of the park as comparisons. To me, this one's like now we're rolling into Fantasyland.
Yeah.
Um, and it has just this total like whimsical fairy tale like atmosphere to it. And yeah, I mean, it's all of those things, and it's also quite jazz influenced as well. The da 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 da. That could be like a bebop saxophone line if you played it and wanted to play it that way. But instead, Brian takes it in this total whimsical direction. Um, and then, oh, oddly enough, with the Disney thing going on that we've been talking about, on the '04 version, they made it like a pirate themed thing.
Mhm.
So there's almost that Pirates of the Caribbean vibe to it, which I can't believe we've been able to continue the Disney references here. But yeah, for that, I do really like there's like this funny like pirate rap thing that Scott Bennett does on the 2004 version. Um, that's the only way I could describe it, is a pirate rap, or it's I guess like a sea shanty or
Yeah. See.
um
Yeah.
yeah, so I do like the way that it was fully realized with the '04 version. But yeah, it's just full with cool musical ideas.
Yeah, this is one I really like a lot. I think it's a very nice instrumental. Like Nate said, I think that's totally on the money. Totally get like a Disney vibe listening to this. Like you could imagine this as like a soundtrack and something, you know. Yeah, the song is just a total groove. I really love the instrumental blend of both like the marimbas with the flutes and clarinet. Really like the use of the slide whistle too. I think that gives it a very like whimsical sound. I will say I do prefer this to On a Holiday from the Brian Wilson Presents Smile album. That one almost feels like a little too cluttered for me, like with the vocals. I actually do like it just as like in its instrumental form. So
Um, this is actually my favorite instrumental on the album. I actually prefer it without the vocals.
me too. Yeah.
It sounds a bit like, music to the Jungle Book, but like in the best way possible. I think I think it works so well because compared to a lot of the other like instrumentals, I know this was supposed to be like a fully realized song with lyrics, but it works better than a lot of the other ones for me because those ones seem like fragments, and this one is more fully realized. You have all the things just finished. It is more of like a backing track than an actual like just fragment of music, and I really like it for that. And I think it works really well as a, like a stopgap between like the last, I guess, third of the record and then the one before. And it works really well. It's like a bridge between like the Surf's Up kind of, suite of music, and then now we have like the elements and good vibrations coming up. So I do like this one a lot.
Yeah, it's a very fun track. Marimbas and everything, clarinet, all that sounds pretty cool. I haven't listened to the Brian Wilson Presents Smile one in a while. I just remember, yeah, it's like pirate themed. Um, and I know this we just call this the freaking Disney episode because we keep bringing up Disney. But yeah, no, this is a fun little instrumental. I think you said it best, Jake. It's very whimsical, and that's always a. I don't think we've said that much at all throughout this whole podcast, but I think a lot of Brian's best stuff has a bit of whimsy to it and childlike charm. So it's nice.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like this album you're getting both of that. You're getting the some of the whimsical sounding songs like with the yeah like you said like the childlike charm, but then you're also getting moments on a lot of these songs and sometimes like songs as a whole that are just like very haunting sounding, and we have a couple of those coming up soon here, but yeah, it's just a very interesting album in that there's a whole variety of different atmospheres and sounds going on. So all right, Nate. when,
Um,
when
Going into the next one, Windchimes is one of the songs on this album to me that sounds like the Beach Boys. Like a lot of these songs to me sound like very far off in different directions and different experiments. And, a lot of these songs that we've been talking about, the Beach Boys aren't even performing on. They're
Mhm.
instrumentals written by Brian and performed by the Wrecking Crew. But to me, this one, it has that kind of summery Beach Boys vibe. And I could even kind of imagine this one on something like Summer Days, like from a few years prior. Like it just has kind of like a cool, laid back kind of rock and roll vibe again. Um, so I think this one could have been chosen as a single. I think the verses have that like nice, relaxing, kind of groovy, dare I say, almost like a little funky with that the syncopated like or it's almost like the marimba plays like a reggae feel on just like the da 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 da. It's like a reggae feel. Um, so and then you get to those, I guess what you'd call like the B section or the hook, where it's those really great horns and the Beach Boys harmonizing. And yeah, it's just to me, out of all this batch of songs, it's one of the more accessible songs, kind of in a what I'd call basically a pop song, whereas many of these are like avant-garde experiments. So this is easily one of my favorites on the album. Such a memorable bass line, and the lyrics are pretty cool. Very, very Brian lyrics. This is one where I believe he wrote the lyrics on his own, and it sort of gives you a hint of like the Beach Boys love you and adult child with like how simple and like observant the lyrics are. Like some of Brian's lyrics that he wrote by himself were always like observing the world around him, like busy doing nothing and things like that. So yeah, I could go on all day about this song because I think it's just super catchy, super groovy, and yeah, would have been a cool single in my opinion.
Yeah, so back when we did our Smiley Smile episode earlier this year, I said that my hot take of the show was that I preferred the more stripped back, creepier sounding version of this song on that album over this original version. That said, though, re-listening to this one multiple times over the past week, my opinion has completely changed. As much as I do still really like that Smiley Smile recording and the kind of like haunting sound to it, the arrangement on this one just totally clicked with me. I don't know why it took so long for that to happen compared to some of the other stuff on here, but I can definitely say now that this is one of my favorite tracks from Smile. I just think that it has a really cool arrangement with the marimbas during the verse. And then, like Nate mentioned, that super heavy and loud chorus section with the horns and the really powerful drumming. I believe from, is it Hal Blaine or Dennis on the drum? I think it's Hal Blaine.
Wow.
Yeah. Really love the drumming. I also really love that part where most of the instruments drop out and you just hear the piano and the harpsichord. I think that that has a very haunting and almost like unsettling sound to it, which I really like. And for me, honestly, Nate, I know you said you could see this coming out earlier, like had this come out in summer days, you think it would have fit? For me, I think the opening, like the verse part, like with the marimbas and stuff, that to me sounds like it could have. Once those horns come in, though, that totally sounds more like Brian's kind of like more out there stuff, from
Mm.
around this mid 60s period to me. Like that totally, like if that was on an earlier album, that would have like really, I think, freaked people out. They would have been like, whoa, like what the hell is this? So yeah, really like the song though. Also think Brian's lead vocal is great during the verses. I think it's just a really smooth delivery, and I think that it perfectly fits the song. So this is definitely the track on Smile that has grown on me the most preparing for this episode. I think that it's awesome, and I think it's a great example of Brian's production really enhancing a song. So I really like this one a lot.
Yeah, that Smiley Smile version of Windchimes is very haunting. I think it's in a minor key where this one's in a major key.
Yeah,
Um,
and then you have the wind chimes.
yeah, it's like they're trying to make it creepy. Like this one is, I don't know which one I like better, but I like both a lot. I know this one is definitely more fully realized. It has a lot more traditional. Well, I guess not necessarily traditional, but it's more, yeah, I guess I'll say traditional arrangement
Yeah.
compared to the one on Wind Chimes or the Smile Smile version where it's just like as creepy as possible. Um, and I don't know, this one's just very, it reminds, Nate, you said this could have been on like Summer Days. I think this could have been on like Friends.
Hmm.
The general like vibe of it. And I really like this one. And who knew a song about wind chimes would be so happy and, catchy?
Yeah, this is a very catchy song. This one to me has a bit more of a, what do I want to say, like it's a little bit more, I guess, like whimsical, a little bit more charming vibe, ambience feel than the other one. The other one feels a bit more creepy, a little bit more like tense. Um, I'm not sure which one I prefer because I really like both versions. I think it just depends on what mood I'm in because this one feels a little bit more breezy to me. The other one feels a little bit more on edge. I guess it just depends on the mood I'm in. But I really like both versions of the song.
I feel like on the Smiley Smile version, like the whole thing is just really kind of like creepy and just has this haunting atmosphere to it from the very beginning. Where like on this one, like the verses I think are very breezy and just very like relaxing and chill. And I could totally see like the verse part of the song fitting on like something like Friends. But then, once that heavy chorus comes in with like the blaring horns and stuff, and then that like creepy like solo piano part, I think that that's like almost just as haunting as the Smiley Smile version, just because that section is like so heavy and just blaring. So I think on this one, you're almost getting like both worlds. Where like on the Smiley Smile version, you're getting more of this like kind of like trippy, laid back version. Where on this one, you're getting the breeziness, but you're also getting a really haunting, really blaring part as well. So speaking of haunting, Nate, do you want
Yeah.
to the next song?
So now we're moving into, I think, what the band themselves and many historians would consider like the defining piece of music that represents like this era of the Beach Boys and kind of what Brian was going through mentally, and it's all kind of baked into this one song, and that is Fire. And this song, I think it's safe to say, scares the shit out of everyone that hears it for the first time. Like it's really, really like fucking alarming to listen to the song, probably because of all the alarm noises in the song. Um, but yeah, like anytime I've even showed like music producer friends or people that are like hip to different kinds of music, people are almost always like, turn it off, turn it off, turn it off. Like it will like instantly overwhelm people, which is the point, you know? Like it's an incredible translation of like the idea of fire being this like powerful, destructive, dangerous thing. It totally encapsulates that in music. Um, but I will say this used to be one that I didn't care for, but I grew to freaking love it. And it's I particularly love the I guess what you'd call the B section. So, you know, it starts with just all the sirens and all the chromatic and all that. But then when it transitions into that
It's the
song
part
that
with,
revolves around the bass riff, the
yeah.
bom 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 bom. I love that. And people might not know this about me or think this to be true, but I actually do really love metal music. And to me, that B section of the song is just metal AF. And like it's like a straight up metal song at that part, in my opinion. Like I don't know why you're doing that, Riley. Like the
You'll
drums.
learn why real soon. Oh, you'll hear.
Yeah, and I wouldn't like necessarily stake claim to it being the first metal song. Like I guess I'm not educated enough in that genre to point to any first song in that genre. Um, the Beatles claimed to do it first, as well, but I do think like what I hear in my favorite metal music, I absolutely hear in this song. The really low tuned guitars and bass riff is just super, super cool. And I always interpreted the way that Hal plays the drums on this song like um like a house tumbling down from
Mm.
flames. Because Hal's fills go the ba 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 ba. And to me that sounds like a structure like imploding on itself. And so um and there's just, you know, the infamous footage of this of the fire sessions where you see all the Beach Boys in the fire helmets, and you know Brian had burning wood in the studio to make the musicians have that intensity. And man, it's a crazy piece of music, but if you can stomach it, I think it's one of the coolest pieces of music ever. It's not for everyone. It's like almost uncomfortable to listen to, but there's a lot of musical richness to it as well. And I think Brian and yeah, Brian absolutely deserved his Grammy win for it. I think it's extremely inventive musically and, you know, totally deserving of a Grammy in my opinion.
Yeah, so re-listening to this one for the first time in a long time this week, I think I can say that honestly, this is probably one of the creepiest and most unsettling pieces of music I've ever heard. Judging the instrumental just by itself, I think that it's really cool. You know, between the sound of the sirens and those ascending and descending strings, like Nate mentioned too, the fuzz bass, and then those super heavy drums. It really does create this like really haunting and like spooky atmosphere. Like Nate said, like it really does like kind of give you the feeling of like you know, being in a fire and just like the, you know, just like you said, the destructive nature of it. And Brian really did create a soundscape with this one. I feel like I will say, re-listening to this though, it is kind of hard not to think about how, you know, messed up Brian was around this time, like with all of the drug use and everything, and just the mental struggles that he was dealing with. So, I will say this is one of those ones where, like, if I'm thinking about the context of it, it does kind of give me a weird feeling when I hear it. I do think, though, it is a very impressive recording, and this is another one of the ones from the Smile sessions that has grown on me a ton as of late. I still feel like it's one where I have to be in the right mood to listen to it, but like when it hits hard, like it really does hit. And like Nate said too, I think Brian definitely deserved, a lot of praise and deserved the awards for this thing because it really is an impressive track. This is another one too. I really recommend listening to the session highlights from the Smile box set. It's really interesting hearing the band working on this one and like hearing all of the different parts kind of coming together. So yeah, there's a journalist who described this track as he said it was a dark, booming, reverb-drenched blur of sound, and I think that's a great way to describe it. So yeah, really cool song. And I'll say before, Riley talks about, the whole like, is this metal thing? I agreed, with Riley at first. I don't really hear it, but re-listening to it and listening to like the session highlights on it and like the band working on it and hearing like the individual parts, like with the fuzz bass and or the fuzz guitar and everything, I can hear it. I do. It's maybe not necessarily at the beginning, but in that second half, like Nate mentioned, where you've got like the super heavy drums and that just blaring riff and just like the way it's just like chugging along, like I can hear it. I wouldn't say it's a metal song, but I can hear how this could be influential on a metal band. But I wouldn't necessarily say it's a metal song, but definitely a very cool recording for sure.
It is a great, interesting song. I think I actually mentioned, I did not think, I know I mentioned this in the beginning as like it's amazing. Like listen to the individual parts of it and then like just the flutes and just I don't know, like the fuzz bass and stuff.
Mhm.
And you put it together and you can't really hear the individual parts anymore. Maybe like some of them, but like not really. It's like it's a soundscape and it's very cool. And it's a very intense song.
Yeah.
And like, especially, hearing how like, Brian would like we hear stories like Brian heard this stuff in his head like every day. And that's like what made him like write it as music. And that's truly frightening. Um, it's a very intense song, and I think it deserves all its praise. Like I don't think I'll ever really listen to it on its own. I won't go out of my way to listen to it. But it is a very interesting and inventive song. I don't think it's metal though, and I just don't think it's really influential on metal at all. Um, for starters,
I'd agree with that.
yeah, it didn't come out in 1967. So like how it would influence a metal band. You fucking kidding me? Like I don't think there's a metal band out there right now, or even back then, like a band out there now who's like, a bunch of teenagers listening to like metal music, and they're like, "Oh yeah, you know what made me decide to do metal? It wasn't Pantera, it was the Beach Boys with Fire."
The metal band that I was in,
Nate,
one
you
of
don't
one
count.
probably.
You know you don't count.
Yeah, I mean, like
I
when
think
I
you're like the
The
one
outlier.
outlier.
Nate's like, I heard All I Want to Do in student demonstration time and fire, and I was just like, man, metal. Let's
Um,
I will say, like I said though, I agree with you that it's not actually like a capital M metal song,
yeah.
but what I like that I hear in metal, I also hear in this one is like the best way I could explain it.
I think you can make the correlation with a lot of things.
Yeah,
Like
it's like a correlation, not a
like
causation.
I don't doubt that. And, there's a like the fuzz bass in that like, low tuned guitar and is in there. But like I when you listen to the song itself, not the sessions, I don't really hear the guitar at all until like the last 20 seconds or so. And
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like barely there. Again, it's because it's part of that giant soundscape of like sounds. Um, but I don't think Brian invented metal. I don't like that's just I think that's ludicrous. I think it's he didn't invent metal. I don't first of all, he wasn't trying to. I think he like made a very intense song. I think if anything, he's a lot closer to like ambient music. He's a lot closer to like the kind of stuff that like Bowie was doing on Low or and some of that. Like it's a lot closer to that than it is to metal.
Yeah, like I feel like
It's gloomy, dark, depressing, frightening music. But like I think metal classifies as a genre when you have maybe that like theme of like gloominess, but heavy, heavy guitars, like a singer
Check,
losing his mind while singing.
check.
Yeah, and like it has like some of the checks, but it's not really minus that gloominess and maybe a little bit of that bass. It's not really that close to metal. And I mean, for starters, I don't even think the Beatles really invented metal with Helter Skelter. I think that there's a correlation with that, that's a separate conversation. But like I
John
think
Lennon claimed they did with Ticket to Ride.
that's even
It's a
more insane.
crazy quote. Yeah.
Um, so I mean, there's a lot of like, there's similarities and it checks a lot of the boxes, but I don't think he invented anything. I don't think it's the first metal song. I think that's a bit ridiculous to say. But as is, god damn, this song is just whack. It's like Brian's like emo doohickey song. It's like that like instrument. You ever see those like those videos of those weird wacky instruments that are like in cartoons? It's like a bunch of like doohickeys and sounds. That's this song, but it's like really sad and scary.
I also
Uh,
just realized it won Best Instrumental, but did they even listen to the song? Because there's voices in it.
I mean, I guess
Yeah,
yeah,
I,
the descending vocals. Oh my God,
if
those are
we're
so
gonna
sick.
argue with the Grammys, we'll be here all night. I mean, they're stupid. What can I say?
Won't be here all night anyways.
yeah,
Um, as far as I mean, yeah, like okay, let's just get this out of the way. I don't really hear it as metal. Maybe like it's heavy. It's got that going for it. Like if I think of like early metal, like wouldn't Cream be considered like more of like a proto metal band?
Cream, Deep Purple.
Deep Purple, yeah.
Uh,
Sabbath is an early metal band, I know.
yeah, Black Sabbath's the first one.
That's the first one, yeah. Or like
That's like undeniable.
Zeppelin, some
You
early
really want to pick, if you want to pick like straws, you could maybe even say the Who, I guess, but
the Who, I can hear it, or like early Zeppelin, I can hear like proto metal. I don't really hear it here. As far as this goes, it's very kind of fucked up, if I'm being honest with you. It's kind of like it's very dark. It is one of the most probably like unsettling pieces of music I've ever heard in my life. And I kind of find it hard to find a lot of enjoyment from this. And I think you kind of touched on this, Jake, just because like in the back of my mind, I just think of like, well, this is like Brian kind of like lost it after doing this. So, eh, I I get it. Like I get the appeal of it, but I don't listen to it much. And it's not even that I don't like ambient stuff, like you mentioned, Riley. I do like some ambient stuff, but this to me is just too unsettling to listen to much. So I just don't listen to it very much. But I can respect it for what it is.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
just.
I agree with you. Sorry, Jake.
Oh no, I was just gonna say like yeah. Again, I think I said this already, but like this is one where like yeah, the first time I heard it like ever, like probably years ago now, I was just like yeah, this doesn't do anything for me, But like yeah, re-listening to it, fully focusing on what's going on and the instrumental, like with my headphones on and stuff, like it's just so like just unsettling and it's powerful. It's really an amazing recording, but just like it's very unsettling. And I listened to this like in the dark in my room with headphones on. I listened to it like twice back to back, and like it just kind of spooked me. It's just really, really a creepy sounding recording. I think when you know everything that was going on with Brian at the time and how this, like Nate said, this was kind of the turning point really for Brian in terms of like the Smile sessions and just like the struggles he'd go through in the future. It does kind of give it an even creepier atmosphere.
Yeah,
It
like
is
I said,
like a meth bender simulation.
like as far as like I said, yeah, like I think it's a great recording. I think it's well performed. I can definitely see the appeal of it, and I don't dislike it. I just find it too unsettling to really find much enjoyment from it. But I respect it for what it is. But it's just yeah, I mean between this and My Solution, I mean they got some fucked up songs.
This clears my solution for me, but
I know I'm not saying this is good as I'm obviously this is a much better song than My Solution, but they got some effed up stuff that and Halo
I,
probably right.
I think this is another example. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Nate, but I think this was another one of those ones where they took later recordings to kind of like finish this one more. Didn't they add the Woody Woodpecker thing from the Smiley Smile? Like the vocals from that, I think were added to this original recording because I don't know if they were there
Yeah,
originally.
I think you're right. I think
Yeah,
you're
like
right.
the ooh,
Yeah, I
yeah.
could I could definitely hear I definitely heard Fall Breaks and Back to Winter in here because I know they did reuse pieces of Smile throughout the discography. They were like
Right,
good
but I think in this case it was they
other
when
way
they were
around.
it was yeah then when they were compiling it, yeah, they took that and they're like, let's add this into there, and I think it works really.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know that the Smile Sessions has been kind of controversial for some people because they didn't like certain things that were made to it. I know that they structured it a lot out of after Brian Wilson presents Smile, and then of course there's like a bunch of different bootlegs, then there's different mixes on the Good Vibrations box set. Now we have all
Yeah.
these AI versions of this. It's just like a never-ending story. Like, you literally could spend months listening to different versions of Smile and different takes of everything.
All right, Nate, we want to move on to another one of the songs that was part of the, I guess the proposed like Elements suite.
Yeah, so this next one is Love to Say Dada, um, which was the last song that Brian produced during what is considered like the Smile sessions proper, so to speak. Like different historians sort of mark different start and end points, but the general consensus is that this is basically the last one that Brian was working on in this era. And, I guess I will say that to me, this one does sound like Brian's a little like checked out at heart. Um, and yeah, like I think all the prior songs we talked about to me have such memorable melodies, and this one hardly has one. Like if I imagine it in my mind, all I can hear is Mike doing the la 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 la, and I can hardly, like there's not really much of a melody there. It's some guitars strumming and a lot of echo. Um, and I will say one thing that's kind of cool about it is how much the echo is kind of the music. Like it's really turned up to 10 on this one. Um, but yeah, there's not like really too much to say that I can think of because it's mostly um just a backing track.
It,
Um,
it it evolved into a really cool song though.
amen to that. You're 100% right about that. So yeah, what they did do with it eventually by turning it when Mike and Bruce and Brian and they all revisited it in the Sunflower sessions, that is one of my favorite recordings. But yeah, this one to me is just like I said, it's kind of the sound that Brian's kind of checked out a bit at this point. I don't think his heart was in it as much. And so a lot of the kind of inventiveness that you heard on the other tracks kind of absent from this one.
Yeah, to me, when I listen to this one, like I kind of just think of Cool Cool Water, and like I kind of feel like I'm listening to like a very, very, very rough draft for that song, which would come down the road. It kind of has kind of like the same groove as that song would. Just it's more a little bit faster and. Like Nate said, it does feel pretty incomplete. It's definitely not like a highlight from the sessions by any means. I know this was recorded later on too. Yeah, it's fine in the context of the Smile sessions, but like, what this evolved into, I think, is far, far, far better than like just the small piece that's here. I think Cool Cool Water is a really, really cool song that really shows like, the band's talents with, just the production and the experimentation with the different sections and like the really like haunting vocals throughout that. That's just such a not to use a quote from the song, but it's such a groove. So really like Cool Cool Water, but
It's such a guess.
love to say Dada. It's fine.
It works in the context of whatever this is. Um,
The greatest album of all time.
the greatest compilation, maybe. Um, I don't know, man. Cool Cool Water exists, and that one's just such a gas. So
Oh Jesus.
I don't know. I mean, knowing what this became, it's like listening to some demos of like some of your favorite songs of all time. Like, yeah, they're really cool hearing it in that form, but like it's become something much greater and just much more
Yeah.
impressive. So
Yeah, this is a nice fragment. Not, you know, um, whatever it is, but I do agree that it was used and they used it to flesh out Cool Cool Water, which is a great song. That's a song that's actually grown on me a lot. For years it didn't do much, and now I really quite like it. So yeah, like I agree with you, Riley. Works in the context of here, but I think like in the back of my mind, and yes, I know I'm making a reference, another Beach Boys reference. In the back of my mind, keeping Cool Cool Water there, it's like, well, it's nice to see like kind of like where this started, but I'm happy to see where it ended up. Like those memes where it's like this is how it started, here's how it's going.
All right, so last track on the, well, actually there's You're Welcome, which we don't have on our running
We'll
list,
we'll
but
we'll talk about that at the end.
yeah, but last proper song on the album is Good Vibrations. And we've all talked about this song many different times on, you know, when we did our Brian episode recently and on your guys' Smiley Smile episode. And the world has talked about this song endlessly, but in the context of this conversation, there's something that really, really stands out to me after talking about the previous songs. We just went through over a dozen songs, and quite often our takeaway was like, yeah, the music's pretty, but it's not relatable or it doesn't really resonate. And getting to this song, Good Vibrations, after all the previous songs, I think just makes it so obvious how important Mike Love was to this band. And it just goes to show that Brian's music can be so brilliant and so gorgeous, but without that cool factor that Mike adds to it, it just doesn't hit the same. And when you finally get to this song, which has that Mike Love element, it just clicks and you remember what makes this band so unique is that it's Brian's incredible music and then the cool spin on it that Mike adds with his words and hooks. And so I get to this song and I think like, gosh, like these previous songs on the album maybe could have been a lot more complete and more catchy and more commercial if, and I'm not saying Mike had to rewrite all of Van Dyke's words, but imagine if Brian let Mike do his thing with like adding a couple hooks to some of these songs or like just doing his thing to bring it all together. Um, and people could easily joke and say that Mike would turn the songs into surf songs or whatever. But like you look at Good Vibrations and it's like the perfect balance between psychedelic, groovy, and then like music that I mean, excuse me, lyrics that people could actually relate to and actually sing along to and remember. So yeah, I mean, in the context of this conversation, I would just say that Good Vibrations kind of reminds us that
Destinations.
that Mike and Brian had like a one of a kind partnership, and Brian could make music with anyone and have it be great. But I think the music that Brian made with Mike is like the top tier of their work as a band.
Yeah, so as Nate said, we've talked about this song countless times on this podcast, so I don't want to take up too much time here, but I will say like re-listening to it with all of the other Smile Sessions material and then, getting to this at the end, um in a way, it almost feels like, and I'm not saying from a production standpoint it's like normal because it's obviously not. It's such a cool arrangement and the production is just really, really inventive and cool, but in a way, like it almost feels too normal compared to a lot of the other tracks on here. So in a way, I can almost see why some people kind of mentally separate this one a little bit from the album. Like it's a great track, really inventive, with the production, and I love the organ at the beginning and the way that the vocals are stacked and everything. But yeah, like I just feel like it's so much more accessible than everything else on here. And I think, like Nate said, a big part of that is Mike Love's lyrics. And I do think like melodically, it's one of the more accessible songs anyway. And I also would say that I don't know if I can picture Mike writing lyrics for Cabanescence that would make the song necessarily more enjoyable, maybe more accessible, but not necessarily more enjoyable. But yeah, it's a really, really amazing song. I know this version is different from the single release, and that it has the hum dee da at the end. That actually took a while to grow on me, but over time it has. I do like it now, and I think that it does. It works well with the song on the album. And yeah, this is another one too. I would totally recommend, listen to the session highlights. It's really cool hearing the Wrecking Crew working on this and hearing, the different versions of the song and hearing how it, initially sounded to the final version that eventually got released. So, one of the best songs of the 60s and one of the best pop songs of all time. And I think it's one of the best examples of Brian and Mike collaborating. So,
I love Tony Asher, but man, the lyrics he wrote for the
ugh,
I think he works really well with like the sadder kind of like
yeah.
melancholic heartbreak songs. Not for Sunshine Pop. Definitely not. All respect to him though. He made some of the best lyrics of all time for one of the best albums of all time. Um, yeah, I really like the Humdy Does, but other than that, there's nothing new I can really add to the conversation. I think it fits well within the context of whatever Smile it became. I think it was a wise move to put it on any version of this album that came out. Um, I do think that Surf's Up probably should end it though. Um, like I mean, I could see cases for both. This is like the happy ending, but Surf's Up, I mean, it's Surf's Up. This probably could have been like either a side B opener or something. But then again, I guess you don't really have all like I don't know. Should have opened the side. Maybe not the album, but definitely the side. But still, nothing new I can add to the conversation. It's good vibrations, assassinations. Um,
I don't, yeah, Riley, I don't, I'm not too crazy about where it's sequenced. Now that you mentioned that, like, it is kind of a weird, I feel like it, yeah, like you said, it should have opened the album or opened a side or something. I just feel like when I think of like what would close this like really, like really cool collection of just like really out there songs and just like, like just the haunting atmosphere of a lot of the album. I just feel like Surfs Up just makes so much sense as the closer, but.
Especially with like the farther you get into the record, the darker it gets.
Right. It's like, and all of a sudden at the very end, I love the colorful clothes. It's like,
Yeah, like this was like I don't know. I think down the line we're probably gonna do like an alternate albums,
yeah,
episode.
yeah,
So I think we could probably talk about it then. But yeah, it's Surfs Up should have been the closer.
yeah,
Spits more. Plus, it's called Surfs Up, like the Surfs Up kind of thing. It
yeah,
makes more
right,
sense thematically.
right.
Um, when you said happy ending, I was thinking of that damn Little Richard collaboration.
Oh
Ugh. Yeah, I'll keep it. Masterpiece of a song, one of the greatest pop songs ever, one of the greatest songs ever. A great both a song that is both experimental and also has a wide appeal. Mike Love's lyrics are definitely better than Tony Asher's. The Humdy Dums is a nice little part in this one, and it works great as a capper on the album.
I do like how the live versions in like the 80s and I think probably the 90s too. Mike would extend the Humdy does into the live set like that. I mean, I don't know if like crowds had the context to that, but you definitely know where Mike gets it from. Like that,
Yeah,
it's just like I just pieced that together because I was oddly enough thinking about of that like one in Washington D.C. I think in like 1980 where the Humdy does is like 7 minutes.
Yeah, and even when you see Mike and Bruce's band now, they play like the outro really faithfully, and the outro on the single version fades like almost instantly, but on stage they stretch it out for like a good like 30 seconds.
hmm,
Um, and yeah, it's cool when they like integrate some of those like smile session versions of the song onto the stage. And like you said, I don't think people ever have the context for it, but it makes the song longer, which no one's complaining about.
And that gives audience participation.
Before we wrap up our discussion, now that we've gone through like a lot of the main tracks from the Smile sessions, did want to mention some additional songs from the album. Nate, do you want to shout out any other tracks from this period of time?
The only two that are coming to mind, and I'm sure you guys might be able to think of some more, um, is You're Welcome, which I mentioned
Yeah,
already. Um, which, really neat, beautiful piece of music. Um, did that one? No, that one didn't appear on Smiley Smile, right?
It was the B-side to Heroes and Villains.
yep,
Right. And this one is like how I kind of bring up sometimes, like when their music foreshadows music they would make later. I feel like You're Welcome definitely foreshadows Smiley Smile and already has that Smiley Smile vibe. And then the other one that comes to mind, a lot of people debate over whether this is a Smile track or a Wild Honey track, but Can't Wait Too Long
yeah,
is another one that comes to mind that is like a reinterpretation of Windchimes. And I'll just say Can't Wait Too Long is one of my uh one of my favorite recordings. I know I say that about a lot of songs, but man, it's just an incredible, incredible recording. I love the extremely dense harmonies, and then it goes into the like R&B kind of thing. And so I think when I mentioned that Wind Chimes could have been a single, I think Can't Wait Too Long actually pushes it even more into a direction that's like a bit more commercial, a bit more like just straight up R&B. So yeah, those are the two that come to my mind. Any other ones that you guys can think of?
Well, the one other one I would mention, he gives speeches because
Oh, right, right,
that
right.
would become she's going bald on Smiley Smile. But yeah, that one, it's a cool little groove. It's nothing too crazy, but it's catchy, and I can definitely see why the band reused it on Smiley Smile for that trippy song. And then yeah, like You're Welcome is it's a nice little kind of like a cappella style track, and then of course, also, around this time, Brian was experimenting again with like some like comedy style tracks, like skits.
Oh, there's all
So
those. Yeah.
you have Brian falls into a piano, which is basically like the Smile version of Bull Sessions, where it's like like it's just like a more out there version of Bull Sessions, where like Bull Sessions is more like the wholesome, like the guys are sitting around like eating burgers and just joking around and doing like this like stage press conference thing or interview, where Brian falls into a piano is like this like very like trippy thing. It's like, oh, Brian's in a piano, and then like, oh, he played a C and it's like hurting it, hurting his ear. He's like, ow, and stuff. It's just like a more trippy version of like the earlier versions of these like spoken word tracks that they did. So I thought that one was worth mentioning too.
I have this bootleg called Psychedelic Sounds that's like 30 minutes of that shit of like the comedy tracks. Yeah,
Yeah,
that stuff is so zany. I can't believe that stuff slipped my mind.
nah.
I love the vegetables skit with Brian and Hal Blaine. You heard that one?
I maybe how does that go, or what do they say in that one? Or
Um, Hal Blaine's like yelling at Brian not to steal the vegetables out of his garden. And then he like gets mad and Brian's like, whoa, whoa, cut. He's like, yeah, that was a little too mad, Hal. Like you gotta like be cool, man. Be
well, I have
cool.
heard that. I have heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hal Blaine, you're playing the part a little too well there. Um,
Yeah.
Yeah.
no, I think with the comedy stuff, I've heard inklings, like Brian wanted to do like a comedy thing inside Smile, and it was just like one of the many different, I guess, directions in like ideas he had for it. Kind of shows how like lost in directionless the album really was. You're Welcome is pretty cool. Oh, definitely a B-side though, or maybe like an album closer, but it is not meant to be like a serious like top tier track. Can't Wait Too Long is definitely a bit more Wild Honey, I think, in terms of
Yeah.
the like that's like definitely 67, but it is a really cool track. I do really like the little with the guitar part. That part's like one of my favorite like parts of any song that they did. Um, we can't forget Tune X, Carl Wilson's best song. Um,
If anyone's curious, that's in reference to some comment someone said that suggested that that was
it was
Carl's
not a comment, it was a full post.
ruffle.
And like it's cool. But seriously, like Long Promised Road, The Traitor,
Feel flows.
maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not joking, Jake.
Angels
I'm
come
dead
home.
serious.
Angels come
It's
home.
getting late.
Tune X is pretty cool though. I will say I do
It
enjoy.
is cool. It's just like, dude, it's a fucking fragment.
Yeah, it's neat.
It is neat, and I'm glad Carl's got like that's you can definitely like see Carl getting more comfortable with like the producer's chair and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, and then there's
Oh,
like,
there's also the tune they did with Jasper Daly too on here.
oh, with me
Oh,
tonight.
Teeter
There's the
Totter Love was the one with Jasper Daly.
love.
Isn't that the one where Mike said like that was a cool one? That was a sent. I
It was
like
one of the
that.
good ones.
Of course, because love.
Probably. Exactly.
Yeah. What about I like the version of You're With Me Tonight on here. Has like it's very bass driven. Has a little bit of instrumentation on it. It's really cool, but it's also a bit shorter. That version is pretty cool too.
Mhm.
There's also that one song that Dennis did called "I Don't Know."
Not maybe. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know.
Just called "I Don't Know."
He
Yeah.
seems pretty. Yeah, Dennis is very confident in his answer on that one.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but when they released the soundtrack to the Disney documentary, at first they released like a way longer soundtrack, and then
I
a few
remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
days later it got
Yep.
replaced with like a shaved down version.
Yep.
Yeah. Lame.
And
Lame. Lame. Lame.
I remember when I was listening to the OG version that they dropped, I was like, okay, yep, help me Rhonda. Yep, Surfing USA. And then Your Welcome came on and I was like, whoa, like this is such a cool inclusion. And there were a few of those on that original version of the Disney
Hmm.
soundtrack where
Hmm.
I was like, oh, this actually makes it like a really, really cool compilation. And I was like listening to it all the time. And then all of a sudden I went on Apple Music one day and I'm like, wait, where did half the songs go? And so I thought this was like a really cool inclusion, both in the documentary itself and then obviously in the soundtrack. Um, yeah, that just popped into my mind.
I know that I'm joking. I know Mike had nothing to do with that, but it's just funny picturing like Mike being like, I don't know if you want to include those songs on the
Yeah, for real.
compilation.
For real.
That's a really good like 83-year-old Mike Love impression.
Bruce, yeah, those are fucked up.
Yeah, for real.
Now we all know Bruce's taste.
I hate Little Bird.
That
Little
fucking
Bird
piece of shit.
sucks.
Yeah, Little Bird sucks.
We should really listen to the disco version of Deirdre.
Yeah.
Going his fucking suit, dude.
That cover. No, no, you said the best song on that album is the
Well, somebody that's
Somebody Dances Me.
yeah, and she says and she my favorite part is when he gets like, "Hi, I'm Greg. Would you like to dance?" Before we wrap up, one other thing I wanted to mention. Obviously, Brian, as I mentioned earlier, put out his own like solo version of this. Brian Wilson presents "Smile," which is pretty much him finishing the album that he started so many years before, with help from a lot of his collaborators and friends like Darian and Jeff Foskett. Do you guys have any general just thoughts about that album that you wanted to share?
I like that it's a bit more fleshed out than this. Like it's kind of cool to hear like more fleshed out versions of like I know we on a holiday and what else is on there in Blue Hawaii
Yep.
and stuff like that. I haven't listened to it in a while, but I remember really liking it. And I know that like this version of it basically has kind of become like the definitive version of it because like the Smile Sessions is structured very similar to it.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool record.
I'm glad it came out. I mean, I know I have like really mixed on the the actual album, the music itself, but I'm really glad it came out. I mean, it definitely did wonders for his mental health and just his general like ability to just like to keep working as like an artist, as a solo artist. And I'm also glad that he got to work with Van Dyke and actually finish the album because Van Dyke came back into the fold almost by accident. If you ever watched that like little documentary that they did on it, I think that came out around the similar time, and just like the looks on his face, especially not just even performing like the Smile stuff live in 2004, but just generally performing around that time. Like you see him at Glastonbury doing California Girls, he is like he seemed so happy, so it definitely meant the world. So I'm glad it came out. As for the music itself, like I like the backing tracks a lot. I do prefer the ones this version, and especially because you actually have the Beach Boys harmonies, which is the one
Yep.
thing that's
Yeah.
really missing is the Beach Boy harmonies on it. I mean, maybe it was a better move not to have the Beach Boys around him, or it was, left to the band to continue. I mean, granted, you don't really have Carl anymore, so that was kind of sad, but still. But I just prefer the Smile sessions. I mean, I know the real like Smile, what it looks like is from the 67 version anyways, is like the complete mystery, but I think I think we got a much closer look to what it would have sounded like with the actual Beach Boys on it, which is
Mhm.
I know it was Brian writing the songs, producing, arranging, doing all the work, but it is still a Beach Boys album, and you need the actual Beach Boys on it. But I do like what we got, and I do like the fleshed outness. I just kind of wish we had like a real like an alternate universe, what it would have sounded like with all these finished songs, but like written or completed in 67. But
Yeah, it's now I'm picturing like Brian like going to the guys like, "Hey, I'm gonna finish Smile. You wanna help me out?" And Mike's like, "Oh God,
not again.
let it go, Brian." Jeez.
Brian has been like 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much Riley, what you said is kind of I kind of agree with everything you said. It's like I'm really glad that he finished it. I think it's awesome that he got to work with Van Dykes and like, basically finishing the album with the person that he started it with. I think that that's really cool. I think it's awesome that he did that tour, where he got to perform, the whole thing live and like people really loved that. So that's really cool. But I'm with you, man. It's like, I think it's cool that like some of the songs are more fleshed out on here and everything, but I do prefer hearing those Beach Boys harmonies, and just vocals. And I also do think, like, I don't know, I do think there is more charm to the original Smile Sessions recordings versus these. And they're very solid recordings, but they do kind of feel more just like modern recreations of the original,
Yeah.
which is fine. That's, I get that, but it's just I just prefer. I think there's more charm to the
It
original.
has the same kind of like it's not the exact same, but it's a similar vibe to like if an artist re-records some of their music.
Yes, yes, totally.
Yeah. So it doesn't have the same charm as it did. I mean, there's maybe some enjoyment you can get out of it, but it's just missing that extra.
And I think at the time, maybe when that came out, like I think maybe a lot more appreciation for it. I think now that we have the Smile Session stuff, like I don't know, I think and again, like I don't mind Brian's older vocals, but I do prefer hearing his younger vocals on the Smile Sessions original stuff too. So
Yeah, I personally can't help but go back and forth between which version I prefer.
mhm.
Like even today when I was trying to get ready for the episode, I was like, all right, Nate, you're gonna listen to Smile from top to bottom. And I started with the Beach Boys version. And like two or three songs in, I was like, I think I'd rather listen to Brian's version. And then I'm listening to Brian's version and I'm like, I kind of miss Carl and Mike's voices. Let's go back to the Beach Boys version. And I literally, whenever I listen to Smile, I like can't help but like flip back and forth between the two versions because I think they both really have something that make them the best. Um, what I love about Brian's version, like you guys said, it's all fleshed out, and I think it addresses like most of Riley's like complaints and gripes with the Beach Boys version in that it sounds very well thought out with how the songs transition from one to the next. And there's like added transitional pieces that like bridge the different sections together. And the lyrics are completed, so like the themes are more pronounced and there's more to sing along to. But with all that said, I think it loses a lot of the haunting, scary, almost horror movie quality of the 67 recordings. Like the 67 recordings just ooze with like psychedelia and paranoia and like I said it as a joke that the that it was like a meth bender simulation, but I truly believe it is, like there's moments of like euphoria on like the 67 Smile recordings, but there's also moments of like terror and like very uncomfortable moments as well. And I think for whatever reason, the 2004 version like loses a lot of that. Even though the music is nearly identical, the changes in production throughout the years, like it just definitely makes the 2004 version sound like cleaner in terms of like the audio and the mixing. And it loses a lot of like the distortion and fuzziness of the 67 version. And I think some of the distortion was intentional, like Brian was experimenting with fuzz bass, but he was also doing so many overdubs on 4 tracks of tape that the tracks would just continuously get more like degraded and more compressed as he did more overdubs. But come 2004 and they're using Pro Tools and they have unlimited ability to overdub without losing any of the audio quality. And therefore it just all sounds so pristine. So when I'm listening to Brian's version, I definitely miss the Beach Boys voices and the like haziness to the production. And then when I'm listening to the Beach Boys version, I miss the cohesiveness of Brian's version.
Mhm.
So there's a great, great, great bootleg, and it amazes me because it predates all this AI stuff by like 20 years almost. Um, and it's called the Smile 3971 bootleg. And the 3971 comes from it's 1967 plus 2004, you get 3971. So someone like meticulously like stripped parts from the Beach Boys version and from Brian's version and like mixed them together. And it's really incredibly seamless. And it takes like everything you love about the Beach Boys version with all of their voices and Mike and Bruce and Al and Carl and Dennis, and then it takes all of the segues and arrangements from Brian's version and like mixes them into the perfect version. And that's like arguably my favorite
Because
version
it
of the
has the group
album.
harmonies, right?
Yeah, yeah, it has like the Beach Boys doing a lot of the harmonies, and then it has it's honestly so well done that sometimes when I'm listening to it, I can hardly tell um like which instruments and which voices are coming from which version because it was very well done,
Yeah,
in my humble opinion.
I've heard of that, but I've never actually listened to it. So I'm gonna have to sit down and listen to that in its
I'm looking
entirety.
it up right now, man. You're gonna have a hard
If you
time
guys can't
finding it.
find it, I think I know a guy that might be able to
Nate
send it
knows
to
all
Yeah, you're
on
you're
you.
looking. That was you're looking
Nate's
at
the
it.
plug.
All right, we will wrap it up there. So thank you everybody for listening to the 60th episode of Good Timin'. Hope you all enjoyed the show. It was a lot of fun discussing the Smile Sessions material with you guys, and it was interesting hearing all of your different perspectives on each of the tracks. So, as always, if you like this podcast and want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. We greatly appreciate the support as it motivates us to make more episodes in the future. Also, as a reminder, the Good Time In podcast is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. So there's plenty of different places to listen and keep up with the show. So thank you again, everybody, for listening, and we will see you all next time. Bye bye.